Hello and welcome to the Crate and Crowbar. This is episode 132 on Tuesday the 8th of March. I'm Tom Francis. With me here today are
Chris Thurston
and special guest
John Roberts.
Hello John.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
You might remember me from episode 109. I know most people are familiar with me from 18 minutes and 41 seconds into the Star Wars Kinect credits.
Good answer.
What does that mean? That might one needs unpacking.
That means a lot of people worked on that game.
Yeah.
And
is it really 18 minutes long?
Yeah,
more
no,
than
it's
25
25 minutes long.
25 minutes. Jesus Christ.
But a couple of years ago, I spent 3 very happy days making a mouse droid in extraordinary detail. And then when I played the final game, I realised that you only see it if you idle on a certain menu for 30 seconds. Game development, everyone.
Fucking hell.
What are you working on now, John?
Heatsig with Tom, drawing spaceships all day.
Hooray.
And John was also the artist on Gunpoint and also an artist on Elite Dangerous.
Yes. I also made a mod called The Hidden when I was at uni, which you may remember as well.
That was great.
That was great. I didn't know you'd made that. I don't know that. Have you talked about that?
No.
Ah.
No, it's...
That explains why I don't know that information.
What is the news this week?
The news this week is, it's kind of all Microsoft-centric, and all of it is nice. Is any of it nice? I don't think so. Which makes it all the better that Marsh, lately having gone to work for Microsoft, isn't here. He's in fact now in Sweden as of today, in fact. He's in Sweden. You might actually, I've realised from the questions that some people might be expecting Pip to join us on this podcast. She's actually not going to be moving here for a little while yet for various like GDC / other games industry happening related reasons. So you'll have a good couple of weeks of me and Tom's. And I've got a whole couple of weeks of a big old house to myself.
Yep.
So frankly, it's a miracle I'm wearing pants.
I've heard Clever Man do quite well during regime change. So I've turned up to get some of that sweet podcast money.
Nice. Yeah. Well, we'll keep the Patreon deactivated for precisely those reasons.
So no one can do a power grab.
Yeah, exactly. As the void left by Marsh.
So Don Marsh.
Yeah.
Don Davis.
If the pain of his loss is ever overwhelming, I have compiled a short selection of facts titled Knobs Through History.
Nice.
So if we miss him too much, I can roll one of those out.
Your bid for power has been noticed by the Bureau. Which means you'll either get what you want or be assassinated. We were talking about the news before we get on to Knobs Through History, but if you want to intersperse Knobs Through History at any point you feel
I've got some pretty good ones.
Let's get one in right now.
Okay,
Let's get a knob in right away.
The Malus Maleficarum, the definitive guide for witch hunters during the Inquisition, wrote of witches who stole dozens of penises, hiding them in trees where they lived like birds in a nest.
Wait,
in the years before we knew what budgies were. So the penises would live... I don't know what's the most confusing thing about that. The penises would live in the tree.
Yes, and that would be a sign that the old crone, probably, who had collected them and put them to roost, would be in Congress with the devil.
Because there was dicks living in a tree.
I assume chirping happily and
What do dicks do when they're alive? Like, what does that mean? I understand, but like, what does the independent life of a dick constitute?
Much like a bird, apparently.
I think we actually need Marsh here for this.
Yeah.
This is backfired.
Yeah, basically, if they're too independent, they just go to Sweden. No, okay, great. I mean, presumably that if you were an old woman and you lived near a tree that was covered in caterpillars, you were fucked. The news this week is that, well, there's two things. One, the first thing that happened was that Microsoft have sort of been moving further and closer towards a kind of unified platform. I think it's called the Unified Windows Platform for Windows 10, which would basically give them a kind of Apple, particularly pre-Apple Macs using Intel chipsets, type of control over all of the useful APIs and things in Windows 10, particularly pertaining to DirectX 12 and stuff, in order to kind of maintain a centralized and Microsoft-controlled app store, which all software would be gained through. To the extent they're already kind of doing this, there's, if you try and install a piece of software in Windows 10 in a way that, isn't the channel that they're expecting to do this down as an app from the App Store, then that is now called sideloading, which doesn't necessarily mean anything bad, because it doesn't mean anything. We were talking about regimes. They've done the first thing you do, when you are grabbing power, which is rename something completely innocuous to something else in order to confuse everybody about what their rights actually are.
There is no word for rebellion.
There isn't.
Only Sidebellion.
You can have a Sidebellion. But not a Reb.
So, I mean, they already have like a Windows store that you can theoretically buy things on, but like nothing good is on there.
But literally no one ever has, so yeah.
And they want everyone to sell things through their store so that they can take 30% of all, PC sales. But, their sort of ploy to do this is that if they make it into like a platform thing, then they can, when they release new features and kind of update things, they can make it exclusive to that platform. So it has to be a UWP app if it wants to use DirectX 14 or whatever in 2 years' time, which is hypothetical. And so if you need to be on their UWP platform to use that, and the only place or the default place to buy things that are made in UWP is the Windows Store, then they can get their cut of the PC market, basically.
It seems gigantically shit. And one of the reasons it was in people's field of view, which is an awfully PC thing for me to say, but I mean in the other sense of that.
And their 90-degree point of view.
Yeah. This week was because Tim Sweeney, who I believe is the CEO of Epic Games, definitely one of the founders of Epic Games, wrote a editorial in The Guardian calling Microsoft out, which is kind of unprecedented, not only for a developer to write a column in The Guardian to try and challenge another person in the industry, but also because Epic worked so closely with Microsoft for so long. Like, they're responsible for the Gears of War series, which is about as close to a first party platform mascot for the Xbox outside of Halo. So, his article laid into them pretty strongly, calling it a actual catastrophe for the industry that needs to be stopped. There have been cooler takes on it since. I'm not sure what my take on it is, because honestly, I'm not sure I understand. How about you guys?
The comparison that Tim Sweeney used that was most useful for me was comparing it to the Android platform, in which Google has almost total dominance of like the storefront in that. On my phone at least, you can get stuff from the Google Store, and I assume Google takes a percentage of that, and that's the point. You can technically load on third-party apps, but you need to go through at least 3 layers of menus to enable that feature. And at every stage it tells you this is wrong, this is dangerous, watch out for viruses and malicious content and so on and so forth. So, yeah.
Yeah, because Microsoft are very keen to point out that this, if you make a UWP thing, you're not prevented from selling that elsewhere. That can still be sold through other storefronts, but it is that kind of ghettoized thing where they push it. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but they make it so that a normal user just going with the default options who's scared by scary warnings probably never would.
It's the equivalent of saying, it'd be a shame if something happened to you after a completely innocuous request, where you're not technically threatening somebody, but you are pretty much directly threatening them.
Yeah. I'm with Tim Sweeney. I think it's probably terrible. And it's also probably true that Microsoft's like first step to this isn't the full disaster scenario. It's like a thing that, won't be too bad at first. And also, as far as I know, I don't know of any like particular features that are exclusive to it. So it's not actually right now a decision that anyone really needs to make as to, whether to, jump aboard. But, I'm sure that Tim is right that that's where they're going with it, and that it needs a big outcry. It needs people to be pissed off about it immediately. Otherwise, you just sort of end up in the situation that you are with mobile, where, the platform holders do own everything.
In Microsoft's defense, they have been very forthcoming that this isn't what they're trying to do. But you can say that while doing it, and it's not like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not a comfort to the person you're wronging necessarily if you say, I'm not doing this, as you murder them. That's maybe a flawed comparison. Certainly
it's a lot like murder, I would say.
Certainly one I wouldn't base a legal case in. But yeah, so there's, I think it seems like such a shit decision that it will fail and the backlash will be severe. But it's like, how many good games will suffer for this?
Yeah, that's the thing that is I always sit here thinking, no, I'll go for Microsoft's latest evil venture because it's so obviously evil. And then Just Cause 2 is Vista exclusive. And, that was like a real pain in the ass at the time. Like, I think it was Vista. I can't remember the exact version, but it was the shit version of Windows that no one was using. And I think they must have just committed to it at the wrong time or something. Like, to everyone else, it was clear that, that's not going to take off and you wouldn't want to make your game exclusive to that. I think the Steam Hardware Survey at that time, which also surveys your software, had Vista usage like 20% of PC gamers or something.
Was it Windows 8 or Vista?
I think it was Vista. It was quite a long time ago, Just Cause 2.
Yeah, I guess it was actually shit, yeah.
And that was, that really was the shit one. That was the one that, people resisted and resisted and resisted, and then eventually, by the time that XP was too old to use, Windows 7 was out, and that wasn't so bad, and people did switch over to that. So, you always want to think people won't go for Microsoft's crazy scheme, but yeah, you're right, there'll probably just be like a couple of developers who just were bound by the wrong deal, or, their publisher thought it was a great idea or something, and will end up making something exclusive, and
what's already happened with Remedy's new game, Quantum Break, which is the one that's tying into a TV show. And like, I think a lot of people like Remedy and for good reason. There's, plenty of reasons to be excited by them doing something new, even whatever you make of the game itself. But the way to launch a new thing is not in the most exclusive environment possible because it's going to be a Windows 10 store exclusive game.
Christ.
And that, to me, basically says it's going to be a failure and there's nothing you can do about it now. Like, I mean, Rise of the Tomb Raider was a timed Xbox One exclusive, and by all accounts a total disaster on that basis. And that's Tomb Raider. There was that horror story that sold something like 70,000 copies when it came out.
Wow.
Which is for a game with that name and that push behind it is appallingly bad. And, that's at the Christmas period as well when it came out on Xbox One. And obviously the PC has a much bigger install base than the Xbox One. Windows 10 doesn't necessarily, no matter how many times they actually literally come around your house to force you to install it at gunpoint or wherever that's going. And, yeah, so I can't see it as being anything other than like a temporary disaster. But like Games Windows Live, which is now over, but in its time managed to just ruin a few things.
Yeah.
So the other thing that's been ruined is also this week was announced the closure of Microsoft-owned studio Lionhead. And the cancellation of Fable Legends, which was their multiplayer, free-to-play, I think, Fable Universe dungeon crawler thing.
And was it a kind of thing where like one person would sort of set up the dungeon and then the other players would play it?
Yeah, it was adversarial. It was like a competitive game where one player was like the dungeon master, but that's actually like an adversarial thing within the game, and the other players are an adventuring party moving through it. And by all accounts, it looked alright. It's dead now.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's a shame to see Lionhead go after.
Yeah, it seems weird. It seems weird to shut a studio like that right in the middle of a thing. I mean, I didn't follow it that closely, Fable Legends, and like whether people were excited about it or whatever, but
yeah, it seems the team was still completely unaware about 5 days ago. They're still responding to tweets saying, yeah, the beta's coming in, it's going to be great, you can play it, that sort of thing. But yeah, the actual developers on staff are always the last people to find out about that sort of thing.
It really sucks.
Yeah.
Like, they weren't quiet about the game. We did a cover on PC Gamer, like, on it. Like, went and played it, like, it wasn't like a piece of, sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Vaporware. That was sort of like, bandied around and then sort of, was obviously never going to happen, so it sort of vanished, which sometimes, well, obviously these things always exist in some form or another. But in this case, they had shown it to the press to such an extent that, people were playing substantial parts of what it would eventually become. The voice acting was done, all that stuff. So for it to...
I just don't know if Microsoft didn't, or perceived it didn't have a lot of momentum, didn't have a lot of sort of cultural cachet, and so it wasn't worth maintaining.
Well, crazily, like, they were using that game extensively when they started to show off the Windows Store and the interconnected stuff, because it was going to be a cross-platform game between Xbox One and PC.
Yeah, that's one of the, arrows in their quiver for that stuff.
Yeah.
Is that it was one of the few games that...
It was one of the few... Yeah, it was one of the few exclusive games. And so if someone from Microsoft sat down and gone, we really don't think this is going to take off. It's exclusive to the Windows Store. Can it? It's like, like squarely punching themselves in the dick.
That does seem sort of typical of Microsoft's history. It's just that its many tentacles have no idea what all the other tentacles are doing, and they're often cutting each other off. Yeah.
Which is about as Lovecraftian as is appropriate.
Yeah.
So it's a huge shame because they made a lot of genuinely great games. Like the Fable series is genuinely, the first two are genuinely brilliant.
Yeah, Fable 2 is definitely one of my favourite action RPGs of all time.
Same.
Which did some excellent stuff with showing the passage of time and your effect on the world and that sort of thing, as well as being really solid in combat and that sort of thing in its own right.
And I got the impression there were still a lot of good people there. Like, I know Lionhead has sort of drip-fed developers into that part of the country around Guildford. Hello Games being one of the notable pockets of post-Lionhead kind of development, I think. But it wasn't like everyone had gone to start indie studios, surely.
In a slightly callous way, it makes me incredibly excited for the new studios that are going to form around them.
Yeah, for sure.
The kickstarted amazing games that are definitely going to be coming as they disperse and reform into new studios.
Yeah, for sure. Like, who knows what the actual reasoning was there, but who knows? Yeah, a mystery.
The weird bad decisions of Microsoft.
If I want to be a total arsehole, I'll say at least Lionhead get to die, unlike Rare.
That's true.
But I know people at Rare who have had an amazing time there and made genuinely quality stuff, so I'm really digging myself a deep hole.
But quickly apologising while doing it.
They just went straight down there and just owned that hole.
Cake at the bottom and ate that cake.
Analogy that no longer makes
whole cake
any sense.
Maybe in lighter news, we could just mention that the PC Gamer Weekend happened.
Sure, yeah, and I met so many Crate and Crowbar listeners there that I'm pretty sure everyone listening to this knows this because they were there. Because I'm pretty sure we have about 20 listeners. But no, it was great. I was so nervous. I mean, it's one of the things I didn't talk about on podcast much, I think, beforehand, was I was so nervous and worried about it because you put, PC Gamer is a magazine and a website, like putting us into the public eye in that way. I was terrified that it would either be disappointing to the people who went or that, it would make us look bad in some way or whatever, but not on purpose, simply because I see other people do events and I see the things people complain about. And, no, we managed to get through it relatively intact. Like, it was fun. There was a good diversity of games. It was bright and airy. It didn't smell. With only a single exception. Every company that we asked not to bring booth babes agreed not to bring booth babes. And, the only company that did sort of got them in around the side. One thing you learn about this industry, that's super depressing when you go to an event, you're like, God, why are they all in the dark and covered in camo netting and women, and hired models. And you think that someone in the events side of that has gone, we want this. It's not. It just grows back. Unless you actively stand against it. That stuff is just default for the way the industry, particularly the marketing side of the industry, tends to perceive itself, which is a huge fucking shame, but it's the way things are.
There's no point chopping the heads off individual models.
Yeah, they do grow. Yeah, no, exactly. Well, not exactly, but I've said it now. So from that point of view, from a my kind of personal pride point of view, it was a big success. But also, everyone I spoke to seemed to have a nice time, and it was really awesome to meet so many great, incredible people. Although super weird to be recognized. Like, it was the only building on the planet where I'd expect someone to come up to me and go, do you do Frank Crowbar? But it happened enough times that it was like, this is kind of awesome, but let's not get used to it. Because it'll never happen again.
Yeah.
For the next time. But we'll definitely be doing it again, so there'll be further opportunities. And I suppose because I was there, and because I was either there or flapping about being there for the last week, I haven't played anything, but I could talk a bit about some of the things I saw there.
Oh, yeah.
Because, yeah, 'cause, I mean, I didn't play anything the entire weekend. I did not touch a game controller or a mouse or a keyboard the entire time I was there. Just there wasn't time. But I did run a live stream for 2 days. And I booked the live stream and did all the producing for it, so I knew what was going to be on it. But it still managed to surprise me with some things that I'm really excited about. And obviously you can watch all this stuff online, but a few things really stood out to me. They're up pretty soon, I think. One of them is Shadowhand, which is the new game by the husband and wife team that made Regency Solitaire, which was a solitaire game.
Which Pip is a big fan of.
Which Pip is a huge fan of. And I didn't play Shadowhand, because I didn't play anything, but Pip was so good at it, because she's fucking terrifying at solitaire, that she won a tricorner hat. And that is the most Pip sentence I'll say this week. But so it's a solitaire puzzle game, which is sort of 50%, like solitaire puzzles, like clear this prearranged deck of sort of cards. I mean, it's like a super solitaire, so they've added like, there are like 6 suits, and the cards don't necessarily need to be arranged in rows. But
are 4 of the suits the normal suits?
No, they're all
special. Okay.
Yeah, but it's the same sort of logic of solitaire. It's just applied to these kind of like spatial and numerical reasoning puzzles with like unlocking parts of things. And then it has a combat system. So it's set in the 1770s, and you're a highwaywoman, and you unlock weapons and things, and then you use solitaire to kill people.
Like they did.
Yeah, and the way that works is actually kind of clever. So you complete, a bit like Puzzle Quest or something like that. You complete runs of cards in the center of the board, and as you progress up a run of cards, you can then activate one of your weapons to do damage to your opponent. So if you've successfully done a run of 4 cards before you've had to draw a card in order to be able to do make another play, you can fire your gun or something. And the higher your run, the more damage you do, which means that the randomness of solitaire card placement is sort of replaces what would be like a random crit chance in a traditional turn-based RPG. And I can see it being, it's obviously lightweight, but kind of intellectually challenging in the way that solitaire is, because it's all about recognizing the odds of a certain thing happening, making optimal moves based on where you believe cards to be and that kind of thing. But because it's set in the 1770s and you play a highwaywoman and you're tracking down like smugglers and fighting redcoats and stuff, it doesn't really look like anything else. And it's actually a narrative prequel to Regency Solitaire. Your highwaywoman is one of the old ladies in Regency Solitaire in her swashbuckling youth. And it's like, it's the only game about a 19-year-old minor noble who goes through the kind of the woods of Shropshire fighting people with solitaire game that you will play this year, I suspect. So, definitely deserves kind of attention. I think it'll be fun in the way that Puzzle Quest is fun. I think probably that's the best analogy for it, except with Match 3 swapped out for that. Saw Frozen Synapse 2.
Oh yeah.
Played properly. They're showing it very, very early. Ian and Paul from Mode 7 came along with a laptop.
And it's open world.
It is.
That sounds nuts.
I imagine they themselves are a little nervous about this comparison. It's a lot like Subversion looked like it was going to be.
Right.
And I don't think that's conscious. I think it's just an obvious sort of idea for a game is to make how do we make like an open world? How do we make sort of like Syndicate, but procedurally generated?
Yeah.
At that level and so on. And, all those different sort of like, sort of cyberpunk influences that I would say were common actually to things like Uplink and also to Frozen Synapse in the first place. So yeah, you sort of have this, city map, which is procedurally generated. It's a very realistic looking cyberpunk city grid. And every single building is a potential mission area and has an owner, which are all placeholders at the moment. But I did enjoy the name of the parcel company, which is called Parcel Tossers. I really hope stays in there.
I saw one screenshot which worried me a little because your team was made up of about 4 people, and you were obviously assaulting a base of some sort that had at least 20 people inside it. And I'm concerned I'm going to drive myself insane individually planning out all 20 of those other moves.
Well, when when the Mode 7 guys demonstrated the game to me, they did generate a level and it did have like 30 people in it. But the noise they made in response to that suggested a kind of, oh, well, this room looks busy. In a kind of like, we didn't necessarily expect the mission generation system to generate an area as big.
So for anyone who doesn't know, the way Frozen Synapse works is that it's turn-based, but it's simultaneous turns, and so you plan out your turn, and then when you execute, the enemy takes their turn at the same time, and so your turn depends on what they're going to do, and to help you cope with that, they let you simulate what the enemy's going to do. So when you have 20 enemies, what John's saying is that you would want to simulate, if you wanted to play it perfectly, you'd actually try and predict what every one of those 20 enemies is going to do, and basically play the enemy's turn as well, and then see how your turn fares against that, and if it's not going to work out well, then you tweak it and go again.
But yeah, so like, they've taken that battle system, which actually isn't that different. They've added some weapons and gadgets and stuff that's new, and the structure of the missions is a little bit different because you show up in a vehicle at the start of a lot of the missions because you are raiding buildings and stuff. And the vehicle will be something that you can customize and that kind of thing.
So is it kind of like a sort of a map, and then you select the building you want to go in, and then you sort of cuts to an actual game
but
mission?
It's quite a deep simulation of a city. So it's not just, you're sort of there to enact your objectives, and there's a story and stuff and events that take place over time on the map. But it's apparently a fully AI driven thing in terms of the dynamics of the city themselves. So it will dynamically generate contracts and missions for you based on how the factions in the city feel about each other. And this was one of the options when you click on a building isn't just like attack. You can also talk to them, make friends with the people who live in the building and offer them things and trade with them in a kind of diplomacy system. But you can also loiter. Like you can send your men to a building. Then you tell them what to do when they get there. And it could be talk to them, or it could be attack. But one of them is just like loiter outside. And that puts pressure on the building, but can like make them more annoyed at you over time, so that someone else might take out a contract on you to stop you from loitering outside this building and stuff like that. So it seems very deep, and like I don't make the Subversion comparison because that was going to be a game about heists and stuff in a procedure-generated city, and I don't think it's quite the same because it's ultimately about sort of tactical urban combat within each of those when you do get down to the level of fighting. But there is a stealth system now as well. So you can, a bit like what sounds like XCOM 2, you can start missions in stealth. And, I saw a little bit of the AI at work with that, which is a really nice idea where when you set off the alarms, that doesn't trigger what normally happens in most stealth games, which is all the enemies within alarm range start to rush to attack you. Instead, what it does is it prompts a dynamic, erection of defenses in the direction they think you're attacking. So rather than charge you, some of them might charge you, some of them will then start to take cover in so if you're attacking, and you're going to have to go through a series of atriums to get to the bank safe that you're robbing, the guards, when the alarm goes off, they won't necessarily just charge out of the bank safe to come and deal with you. They will then set up defensive position in the bank safe.
You can do, distraction tactics.
Presumably, yeah.
Send a small team round to create a lot of noise and then send your sneaky guys in round the back. And
hopefully, yeah. Like, the version I saw was mega early, but really exciting, given they didn't announce it that long ago, and apparently they've only been working on it for about 9 months.
Wow.
Like, it's super exciting. And I was trying to think of anything else that really stood out to me. Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord looks great. And I would love the original Mountain Blade, to the extent that I'll just put a link in the show notes to the 30-minute demo that was on our stream, so you can see me talking to them about that. But now I almost don't want to talk about it anymore, because Stream Chat convinced themselves on the Saturday of the stream that Bannerlord was going to be that day. No one had ever said this. The stream schedule had always put Bannerlord on Sunday. The developers of the game said it was going to be on Sunday. But Stream Chat not only convinced themselves that it was going to be on Saturday, but got so angry about that when it didn't show up on Saturday, they had a consumer revolt based on nothing at all. The thing that happened exactly as it was supposed to, at exactly the time it was supposed to. And this was appalling and an absolute betrayal of everyone in the gaming community. Which was a great crash course in, what a giant shit show broadcasting things to the internet sometimes is. But yeah, that's really all I've seen. I saw a bunch of other games, but I mostly just sat and talked to people about games they were making.
Nice.
What have you played, John? Bait and switch there.
I played a couple of things. I want to talk about Flame in the Flood. I know you covered it a lot last week. but I really enjoyed it, and it sounds like I enjoyed it more than you guys.
Yeah, I did enjoy it. But I think probably last week I talked mostly about my complaints. And when I was playing it, like, I think after I quit, I looked at my list of friends who played it, and then, you were at the top with a enormous playtime, much more than anyone else. And so I thought, John probably enjoys this. He should come on the pod and tell us what's good about it.
I think the key thing is playing it on easy.
Yeah.
Or, it has 2 difficulty modes, and I think they're easy and normal. My lasting memory of normal difficulty was, pushing off from a dock and setting off down the river, and before the next conceivable place I could stop, I had got wet, become overexposed, developed hypothermia, and died.
Oh shit!
So I restarted it on easy. I've gone through this almost the exact same thing with lots of survival games before. I really like the idea of survival games. I get like hooked in by, they always have it, interesting environments, and sometimes they have little, bits of fiction and stuff, and that's really appealing to me. But, then you play them and you spend some time building up resources, and then it murders you over and over again, makes you restart, go from scratch, and it's just incredibly tedious. But I went for the Flame of Flood just because I really, really liked the fantasy. Going down the river, a kind of post-apocalyptic Mark Twain novel, with your dog, and, the fact there was a story there was also, a big plus for me as well.
I never got to the story. I got pretty far. I think it was telling me to get to high ground, and I didn't really know how to do that, so I just kept on going down the river.
Your whole trip down the river, there's like 3 actual story locations, is mostly still very randomized, and there's a light touch. You meet some strange characters along the way, and that sort of thing.
I met some feral children, and I examined some rugs.
Yeah, that sounds about right. You said last week that you can either approach it mechanically or...
I think I said experientially.
Experientially.
That was the wanky word I used.
And if you go mechanically, it becomes too easy. And if you go experientially, you die of staph or bears or over and over
I've died of bears.
Yeah. But playing it on easy sets those survival roguelike mechanics. It doesn't remove them entirely, but it sets them just off to the side, which means that you get to enjoy exploring and the fantasy of going down this post-apocalyptic river and so on. And, but the mechanics add friction and uncertainty to it, which, enhances it rather than sort of cripples it. For me, at least.
I really liked that. I loved when it rained pretty much any time. And I liked that just the fact that when you're wet, you have to do something about it. And it was never that difficult to get rid of it, but it was just kind of a nice atmospheric thing.
Yeah.
And you could also get clean water out of it.
Yeah. It's like, that instead of really challenging you and killing you, for me at least, it pushed me into the headspace of the character. It made me think like a survivor, in that it was really, I would think twice before heading into rapids and risking my already damaged raft when I had very low supplies, or getting incredibly excited that time I found a box full of flint. And I don't think that would happen if it was like a traditional sort of authored experience. As you go down, you don't get that uncertainty.
Yeah. I broke my arm, and I was quite invested in the quest to fix my arm, because, like, there was a pretty logical course of, series of things I had to do to kind of make a splint, and to make a splint I needed X, and to make X I needed Y, and all this other stuff, and I was working on that, and then, it took me a long time to, like, find all the bits and craft all the individual components, and then, while I was kind of 70% of the way there, back on my raft, just, like, riding down the river, and then it said, "Oh, broken arm's healed." Like, what? I was going to fix that. I had a plan. I was working on it.
I remember watching Pip play, and she went up against a bear, and broke 4 bones, or like broke 4 arms, or like both arms and both legs.
Broken all 4 of my arms.
Yeah. Killed the bear, but broke everything. And she was like, "Oh, I'm fine, I got 4 splints." And you just watched her use like each 4 splints in a row.
Wait, how does she apply the first one?
I don't know. Just roll around in it.
Ask the bear.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, easy isn't so easy that you won't die. or run out of food, or desperately need to rest while there's like a pack of wolves circling the only school bus for miles or whatever, where you have to sit down. And you get checkpoints, which is the main thing for me. So I don't have to go back to the very beginning and restart. So it doesn't, they're not too, sort of coddling. So you still have the fear, and it doesn't feel like you're being babied your way down through this sort of survival challenges.
I think I must have been on easy because I did have a checkpoint when I died. It took me back like halfway into my journey. I assume they're somewhat random themselves because I think it was a particular location that gave me the checkpoint. It seemed to be, maybe it was even the story thing. So I think it might have been where I examined that rug. It was a memorable rug.
When we were playing it, there was a bug in the early version where the game would simply immediately crash to desktop if you looked at a rug. So we'd be walking through the woods and you'd like see a wolf and you'd be like, oh no, run. And then you see a rug, you're like, no, God, don't take it.
Not the rug.
Yeah, that's another reason not to play on the survival challenge endless mode, is that it's still kind of unstable.
Yeah.
But, and I also encountered serious inventory fuckery as well. To the ultimate level, I think, where I was trying to craft a pouch that would expand my inventory, but I couldn't complete it until I had made space in my inventory in order to expand.
Can I put the pouch inside the pouch?
It's such an own goal, that system, because it's not like inconvenience in service of the sense that you're really surviving, because the problems it throws at you are so totally abstract. Like, you know,
it's in any real situation, like a sort of transactional inventory limit thing doesn't make any sense, because if it's just a case of having too many things in your hands, you just put something on the ground and then do it.
Yeah, if you're sat on the ground making something,
the interface for doing that is incredibly fiddly. I almost when I was playing, I was thinking it would always be good if these like individual locations I was stopping at just sort of had like all of my, like an infinite inventory while I'm there. And then when I want to leave, it says, okay, which 10 items do you want to bring with you? Because then the interesting decisions would all be in one place. And while you're just organizing things, you'd have as much room as you need to, you know, switch things around and craft things and turn a live rabbit and craft it into a dead rabbit, which needs a new inventory slot, and then craft the dead rabbit into a skinned rabbit.
I think I've heard other people talking about how frustrating it is to go down the river as well, actually steering your way along. I went through a journey with that. Because I think a lot of people start doing this way in that you fight against it. You're, at the beginning at least, you're desperate to visit as many places as possible, and that means crossing, sort of zigzagging backwards and forwards across the river.
Yeah.
And with the currents, it can be really frustrating. But eventually you learn that the best way to navigate it is to just go with the flow. You can actually see currents in the water, and you don't have to paddle like mad to avoid rocks. If you just nudge yourself slightly in the right direction, and the current will actually take you around a lot of stuff. And
I quite enjoyed that part of the game. Like, just, it felt good, and going on a fast current felt really nice. My only complaint about it was that sometimes I would be drifting like just very slightly towards something, and I'd push away from it, and it just wasn't quite enough force, and I'd hit it at a relative speed of like 0.01 meters per second, and it'd go, and I'd lose 20% of my health. I'd be like, oh, come on. And then if you want to dock somewhere, you can just go fucking full pelt into that dock. And as long as you hit A, it's just a completely safe transaction.
yeah.
super fast on a proper raft.
That is how I went.
But yeah. So yeah, my suggestion is to not play it as a survival game. It's to play it as an adventure with some sort of randomized elements. You'll reach the end of the story mode, or at least I did, in about 6 or 7 hours. And then I don't think I'll ever go back to it.
Is that all in one playthrough, or?
That's with some learning deaths,
Right.
a few checkpoints and so on.
That's longer than I thought.
But yeah, I think I'll walk away from it. I won't go back. I don't feel the need to go to challenge mode or whatever. It wraps up what little story it has with the very nice ending. And
right.
yeah, I really enjoyed it in the end.
Oh, that's good. It's interesting because it's one of like 7 former BioShock dev teams. And it's been really interesting to see how they all fare individually, because they all did very different things, and they all, they're all good at setting a reasonable goal for themselves that they could achieve, and, keeping things focused. Flame in the Flood is very focused on just this one thing. And so is Magic Circle, and so is Gone Home. And the one that, from the outside perspective at least, seemed to go the smoothest was Gone Home. And that may be because it's actually quite close to what that team did before, which was Minerva's Den, the DLC for Bioshock 2, which was obviously very different to Gone Home in terms of what it's like to play, but a sort of contained area with some story seeded throughout it, and the story is sort of told in a way that makes the final revelations not clear until the end, even though most of that stuff has happened in the past. And it's, I think, well, certainly the main three people on that DLC are the main three people who made Gone Home. And the thing that always sticks in my head about Gone Home is the freakish thing about it as an indie game is that it was finished ahead of schedule, so significantly ahead of schedule. They really knew what they were making, and they really knew how to make it, and they just made it. And they had that kind of just sweet spot of like, the things it was lacking just didn't matter. It didn't need people walking around and talking, and it didn't need combat, and it didn't need puzzles really. But having that judgment is so hard, and I think Flame in the Flood feels like it's reaching slightly further than they actually could grasp in terms of just, most of the things we've been complaining about are just little fiddly issues that just with enough testing and enough time, they'd come up with, oh, here's the neat solution to this that just solves that problem. And so I think it's probably like slightly more ambitious in some ways. But yeah, it's great that it worked.
Occasionally it works perfectly, and after a tough night being chased by wolves and starving, you'll push off into the stream and catch the currents. The sun will rise, and the acoustic American guitar will come in, and it's just perfect. But
then you die of staph and bears.
I've been playing a survival game where all of that stuff is trivially easy, and you still die of bears, but never of staph, and you never really run out of food. Far Cry Primal.
Which we also spoke about last week, but we were more abstract about.
Yeah, I think Marshall played it for like 1 hour, and I played it not at all. And Marshall wasn't super impressed from that, but to be fair, it's the opening hour. I'm completely in love with it. I just think it's fucking brilliant. I've been obsessed with it. I haven't played anything else since I started playing it, and I've played it, it's interfered with my work more than any other game for a long time. And it has, like every Far Cry game, it doesn't start you in the open world, it starts with a little scripted bit, but that scripted bit is both shorter and better than any of the other Far Cry games, that I can think of. You're hunting some mammoths with some fellow tribes people, and then, something bad happens to the rest of them, and then you, walk down a canyon for a while, and then you're basically cuts to the open world. And then the open world itself is, oh yeah, so actually just, I guess this almost comes on news, but, it was noticed recently that the layout of the rivers in the Far Cry Primal map is exactly the same as in the Far Cry 4 map. And this has led to it was one of the weirdest things, the weirdest sort of like stories I've seen, because when I saw it, I was already playing Far Cry Primal and already loving it. And one of the things that struck me about it is just so profoundly different to Far Cry 4 and Far Cry 3 and Far Cry 2 and Far Cry 1. Like, even though it's a forest still, it just looks so different and just feels so different, and just so much more kind of immersed in it than I was in those worlds. And then finding out that, like, the sort of highest level layout of the map is just carbon copied of Far Cry 4 was really weird, because I remember thinking, this is like a really big story. Like, if I was still a journalist, I'd definitely report on this. And I would also simultaneously say, this could not matter less. There is just nothing that has no effect on the game whatsoever. If the map wasn't in the game, you would never find out. Not in a million years.
So is it like an Easter egg that it's the same place?
Well,
or is it like...
that's the weird thing about it, is no, because they go out of their way to specify this is set in Europe. It's set in primeval Europe. But it's such a weird thing,
Why is
because
that significant?
Oh, because Far Cry 4 was in Tibet. Oh.
Well, no, but I mean, like, why would they even bother to specify that? If it's not like the cavemen understand what Europe is, do they?
Yeah, I don't know. But they did. And, I mean, I don't have any good theories. I have two possible theories. One is, maybe I only have one theory. One is that, maybe that was the original idea, that I could almost believe this started as a DLC, like, 'cause they'd done wacky DLCs before, like Blood Dragon, which took Far Cry 3 to the cyber 80s.
Exactly, yeah. To the cyber 80s.
And if you're going to do that as a DLC, it would make sense to just keep the whole map the same and just, put a skin over it or something. It still doesn't really make sense, because it's still not easy to do that. But in that case, it would kind of be almost like a like a reference to Far Cry 4 to say, oh, and here's what this place was like 12,000 years ago. Still doesn't quite add up because the thing that's the same is the rivers, and that's one of the big things that would change in 12,000 years. Like, it doesn't make any sense on any level. But then also the running internet theory, the thing that's the reason it's become a story in the kind of like, what the fuck kind of way is not people being, why would they ever do this? It's people saying, lazy devs, they just recycle the map. And Far Cry Primal was already suffering from a lot of reviews that said it was just more of the same and it wasn't different enough. And it's kind of like, a lot of people just bummed out by like being sort of promised this radically different setting and then finding that the game was mechanically too similar. Or it's funny, some reviews just categorically said, oh, I kept expecting there to be some prehistoric equivalent to all the Far Cry 3 and 4 tropes, but there wasn't. And then other reviews said, it's really depressing that there's just exact equivalents to all the Far Cry 3 and 4 tropes.
I kind of got this impression, which is why I'm surprised that you've got into it so much, having played every other Far Cry to death before that.
Yeah, it's basically the part of Far Cry that I loved, Far Cry 3 and 4 that I loved, just writ large. It's the whole game of that. In that the thing that Far Cry 3 introduced in particular that made me really love it was the bow and a bunch of improvements to how you do melee takedowns that make them much more viable for stealth, and a bunch of improvements to the stealth system to make stealth itself much more viable, and then outposts which were really carefully designed. You could almost think of them as stealth levels, but in an open world, so you can approach them from absolutely any route, and there's loads of different ways in, and you get a bonus for taking them out without alerting anybody. And I've said many times in this podcast how I think those are like the pinnacle of stealth game design, and just the most fun stealth experiences I've had in games. And those were great in Far Cry 3, they were better in Far Cry 4, and they're even better here. And the great thing about Primal is that it just strips away everything else, so there are no guns, you've got to be the kind of primitive predator. It was actually kind of weird in Far Cry 3 and 4 that you reverted to being a primitive predator, basically, like I did anyway. I just used a bow, a knife, and rocks. Those are my 3 weapons. And in Far Cry Primal, you have a bow. You actually don't. You do have a knife, but you don't use it for melee takedowns. You have a bow, a spear, and a club are your main 3 weapons. And then when you do a melee takedown, you just use whatever you happen to have equipped. So if you have a club, you just smack them on the head and knock them out in one blow. If you have a spear, you drive it through the bottom of their head and it goes straight through their skull. If you have a bow, I actually don't know what happens because I've never done that, but I should.
But you don't have rocks yet. They're future technology.
No, I do have rocks. Oh. They're not, actually, no, they are totally a weapon. Previously they weren't a weapon and they were just like an extra key. And in this, they start off as you just throw rocks to distract people. And that's one of the main kind of stealth mechanics. Then you upgrade it to a sling where you swing around your head. And bizarrely, you can upgrade the rocks to not only, like, if you throw a rock directly into someone's head with a sling, it knocks them out. Well, I think it just kills them because there is no unconscious state. But if you upgrade it, it can also penetrate through their masks, so it's like the lethal headshot sniper rifle, which is very strange. But it's just
what is the nature of that upgrade?
It's called Precision Sling, which suggests that you weren't previously hitting them quite in the head. It was like near the head, but yeah, not quite a knockout.
Like, how? Oh God, I'm trying to figure out the methodology of that. Like, just, if it was like we've sharpened the rocks, I'd kind of get it. But what have you changed about the sling in order to make a precision sling? Does it have like an ACOG sight on it or something? Like,
yeah, the upgrade system, it is full of goofy shit. So there's bee bombs that you throw at people and they explode and killer bees. I thought that was like a sort of distraction technique, but it turns out I tried it on someone and it just killed them all. They just all died of the bees, and that was it. There's the owl that we talked about last week where you press a button and an owl flies up and then you see through the owl's eyes and you control it and you fly around and it tags all the enemies for you. There's the double bow. After the bow, you can unlock the double bow, which fires 2 arrows at once. Which is incredibly dumb, but actually really cool. Cause it basically just makes it more like a kind of sniper thing. Like you can take someone out in one body shot because you're shooting them with 2 arrows at once, so job done. A lot of the upgrades are silly things about like, now this weapon, now this rock penetrates through masks. Now, you sort of accidentally craft 8 arrows at once and stuff like that. There's a lot of like goofy things like that. And a bunch of those don't really matter. And then there's a bunch of them that I just think you should avoid. So I just don't use the owl at all. To to me, I mean, it's just weird. The thing I'm really loving about it is when I started it, I turned all of the HUD off, and I also turned subtitles off. And the whole game is in their own invented language. So there is no English spoken language in it at all. So if you turn subtitles off, you literally have no idea what anyone's saying ever. That's great. And the thing I liked about it was that, it was reducing down the stuff I liked from Far Cry 3 and 4 and just made that the whole game. And then also the setting explained why that was the whole game. Like, you don't have any guns because there are no guns. And it really made a big difference to just be walking around a natural world without roads and without cars driving around. And when you find people, there are people in animal skins walking around hunting. Like, that's what they're doing most of the time. And I'd had these moments in Far Cry 3 and 4 where, you see some, they were like, I think in Far Cry 3 they're all pirates or something, the enemies. And in Far Cry 4, I can't even remember what they are. I guess they're all just like assholes. Military people from Pagan Min's army or whatever. But they never really made sense. Like, what are they doing here? Who are they? Why are they doing this? And then when they're roaming around the jungle getting mauled by jaguars and stuff, it was fun to see. It didn't happen that much. And it was I think I didn't really think about it at the time, but there was something a little bit weird about that happening at all. And then Far Cry Primal, it all just clicks. It just makes perfect sense that all these people are roaming around this natural world because they're actually going out hunting, and you see them hunt, and you see them proactively kill animals and go over and skin them and stuff. And then you see animals hunting them, and that stuff is just turned up to 15. It's just like, I remember I read Andy Kelly's review for PC Gamer, and it starts with this brilliant anecdote of, like, he's just walking through the jungle and suddenly a bear that's on fire comes bounding out of the forest and just setting light to everything behind him, and then there's like 5 people chasing the bear and the bear's chasing other people. And I was like, wow, I really hope I get an anecdote like that when I play. And that just happens all the time. That's just like 100% of your time in Primal is just everywhere you go, 19 things are happening, and it's all just like massively complicated and chaotic but all makes sense. Like, in a way that, the game itself doesn't in many ways, but just the experience of going from point A to point B is endlessly fascinating and terrifying and weird and different every time. We had a question in a few podcasts back about what's the best game to just travel around in, and I can't remember what I said as my answer, but I remember saying that, like, I wish there was a survival game where, I wish there was a version of Skyrim where just getting from Riften to Whiterun was a big ordeal with all these, like, things attacking you and stuff. And that's absolutely what Far Cry Primal is, just getting from... The map feels like 6 times bigger than the last Far Cry, even though I now know that it's the exact same map, in layout. Because just getting... Like, you look at a distance on the map and you say, okay, I want to go to that cave over there, and it's like, 2 centimeters on your screen, and then you get to it and it takes you 15 minutes because you take 3 steps and there's a pack of wolves, so you hide in a bush, and then as you're hiding, the wolves suddenly see a bunch of tapirs go past and they chase them, but then while they're chasing the tapirs, they see some hunters start attacking them, and then they go after the hunters, and the hunters kill the wolves, but then a bear attacks the hunters. I'm still sitting in my bush just watching this. I've sat in a valley for about 15 minutes at one point just watching everything that happened, and it just never stops. Like, one batch of hunters gets wiped out, and a new one comes in 3 minutes later being chased by something else, and they set fire to something else, and some other nutty thing happens.
I guess for me, my worry would be that makes it feel less real and more like the game is arranging a sort of fairground for you.
Yeah, I can see. I think there's probably an extremity to which you could go that it would feel like that, but it hasn't felt like that to me because it's very random, by which I mean sometimes it's pure chaos and 17 things happen at once, and then after that there might be just 2 minutes where nothing much happens, and if you're bored you could go off and make something happen, but it's very variable, and just the places you go and the scenery and the geography varies a lot. Sometimes you're on a high mountain path and obviously there's not much happening there because there's nothing else, there's not a lot of kind of space to play with. But if you're down in the undergrowth in a forest, then there's loads of stuff going on all the time. There's also multiple tribes. There's 3 different tribes, including the one that you belong to. And so you'll see tribespeople fighting each other as well. And so that adds a whole other dimension to it. And then when you finally do, in my first, 10 hours or something, I probably only did about 4 outposts, which are, the highlight of the game. But there was so much else going on, I didn't even notice that for a while. And then when I got to an outpost, it's like, oh my god, this is on top of everything else that I'm loving about this game. It also has my favorite thing from 3 and 4, and it's even better because Previously it was just, like I say, bow and knife just means melee takedowns, which you still have. Now, the bow's still in there, but you hardly use it because the other things are so good, and it's mostly about just spears, because the spear is you can stab people with it, but it's much more powerful if you throw it, and if you throw it, it will basically take out anyone in one hit, but you only have, initially, I think, 3 of them, and if you want more, you've got to craft them from animal hide and wood and flint and stuff, which is instant. I'm not sure it should be, but it just gives you some kind of limit. Like, if you have 3 in your hand, and there's 3 people, or there's 4 people, then you're in a certain amount of trouble. And like, you can get around it because when you go into the craft menu, it pauses the game. But it's one of the many things about Far Cry Primal where I just kind of like take the spirit of it on board rather than the actual mechanics, and I ignore the fact that I could, in theory, for free not for free, but instantly craft a bunch more spears, but I just take it as the game saying, you should only use 3 spears, and then after this fight, craft some more. And that means you're throwing them so they don't go as far as arrows and they don't fly as straight. So you need to be pretty close, but not as close as you need to be for melee takedowns. And so taking down an outpost with that, even when it's an easy outpost, is just a fascinating game of like, how do I get over there? And then when I kill that guy, how do I make sure his body isn't in a place that other people are going to see it? And, they still have alarms. The first couple I did, I thought, the interesting thing about this is you don't have to be stealthy because there's no alarms in primitive times. And then I found the alarms. And
is it an owl again?
No, it's a horn mounted on a tree stump. And it's like, they blow the horn to attract, tell their friends they're in trouble. But the horns are like mounted in particular places in the world, so they have to run up to them. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't just carry the horn. And some of them do carry horns, but, that's how it works. That's how primitive alarms work. And I was skeptical at first, but actually it does work really well mechanically. Like, it's so good. There's an outpost I came across where it's in like the wintry northern areas, and it's a huge camp, but I came at it from the cliffs around, and there's just these huge, jagged, like, blades of rock hanging out over the top of it from every direction. And so you can, using a grappling hook, a primitive grappling hook, which is still in there.
Using the grappling owl.
That's why you like this game.
Yeah, it's got grappling hooks, it's got throwing knives, it's kind of got slow motion, but not really. And it's got bows and all the things I like. But yeah, just scouting that place out, from, miles away on this high rock, and then getting out my longbow, which I just crafted at the time, and aiming. You can like tag the horns. So you know where all the alarms are in the camp, and then aiming longbow shots to just break each horn individually, and then finding the one guy who's carrying a horn and sneaking up to him and like, stabbing him and dragging him into a bush so no one else finds out, and then, going through and killing everyone else, was just awesome. I've now played way more of it, and I've done, probably 10 or 12 outposts, and, they're all just so good. So some of them are just visually stunning, some of them just have like sort of secrets to them. There's one where it looked really simple, and then I noticed there's a little cave entrance nearby, or sort of mine entrance almost. And, I ducked in there for some cover, and then I realized that's the real outpost, and there's a whole mining colony inside it, and there's like 6 or 7 enemies on different levels of the mine, like chipping away at stuff, and, I had to like hastily deal with them. The other thing is that it's the plot stuff. The story missions, I mean, they're very disjointed. This is partly because I've turned subtitles off, so I have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. And also I skip most cutscenes if I can. But they've done a much better job of separating that from what you just do in the game. If you want to do the outposts, you can just basically just do that. And your progress is not gated very much by the plot at all. I think the grappling hook you need to sort of do the first 1 or 2 missions before you get the option to meet the guy who gives you the grappling hook. But then after that, it's just this massive crafting menu, and certain people out there in the world that you go out and kind of rescue. Because I didn't understand the plot, I don't know quite what happens at the start, but it feels like your tribe is kind of scattered. So they're out there, that you do have friends out there, but there is no central village, and you have to build that village, and you go out and just find these specialists. And that's also how skills work, is you can't have the hunter skills till you go and find the hunter lady and bring her back to your village. So you could call that, it's sort of gating it by story progress, but it doesn't feel like story progress. It doesn't feel like having to do this linear series of shitty missions with scripting and bullshit. It feels like you go out into the world, you meet this person, they might have some little, special challenge for you where you go through a cave and you have to defeat 6 jaguars or whatever, but they're pretty short, never too difficult, and they're never really bullshitty like they were in 3 and 4. And then, so most of your time is just spent, the things you care about is like, I want the double bow. I've got a bow, and now I want the double bow, obviously. Or I want to upgrade my rocks so they penetrate through masks by getting a precision sling. And that's the thing you care about, and that's the thing you can be working on all the time, because it's always just, you need these resources. And those are seeded throughout the world, and there are certain ones that you only get in certain areas. So you'll see that this one requires, they just call it like North Rock. You need North Rock. Where do you get North Rock? You go to the north. Where do you get rare North Rock dust? You go to the north and you mine a lot of rock. And, that stuff means that like exploring the world kind of is playing the game. Sometimes I was setting an objective to, I've got to go find the hunter lady and to get that thing unlocked. But then once you've got the first few of those that you care about, after that, I was just walking through the world and I thought, oh, what am I doing? Where am I trying to get to? And then I realized, I don't have any particular objective. I'm just, wherever I go here, I'll find the resources that I need to craft all this new stuff. And so that thing I was loving about the game, which is just creeping through this world, and encountering all this crazy stuff going on, deciding how to survive it and how to exploit it and how to mess around with it, was the game. Like, that's just what I need to do to progress as well. And that's the first time they've ever done that. Like, every other time it's always been, yeah, you're doing the outpost, but that's a waste of time because you need to get to the next story mission to unlock X.
I think that's why Red Faction Guerrilla was so good, in that the stuff you just did because you wanted to, like smashing stuff, that played into the main campaign as well. You couldn't break something without it benefiting you.
How was that? I can't remember. I did play that game, but I can't remember how.
I think everything you smashed earned you credits, or lowered the rating of the dystopian government in that.
Now that you smash that thing, it's a lot less dystopian around here.
Should the government come into Mars building things so we can live?
Yeah, that was a good game. I like the gun in that could just dissolve things, and then you could just shoot walls and it would just evaporate them. That was great.
It sounds like with Primal that it does sound great. It also sounds like you've invented your own game within it.
Yeah, I have.
You have actively ignored huge things that they've made on purpose.
Yep. In fact, probably the biggest new feature is the having beast companions. And I used those at first. I had a little black dog who'd run around and pick up things for me. And then you go through that tree pretty quickly. You unlock skills to get better pets. And I got like I got leopards, and then I got a saber-toothed tiger. And they just make the game trivial. And like, you'll get detected more because your beast will get detected as well. But it doesn't matter because they'll just slaughter everyone almost by themselves. And so I just don't use them. Like, I use them for like you can ride the saber-toothed tiger, which is kind of great. And that's just like my fast travel system. And I just ride my saber-toothed tiger to where I'm going. And then when I get there, I tell him to fuck off because he's gonna both ruin stealth and also make the game too easy. And so yeah, I'm definitely like saying, the HUD for one thing, like, people told me that Far Cry 4 was better without the minimap, but I never actually did it because I was so, accustomed to it. And this time, because I turned it off from the start, I haven't missed it at all. I just don't have any desire for a minimap at all. And having the HUD off just makes such a huge difference. It looks so fucking gorgeous. They've done something new with the lighting maybe they had volumetric lighting before, but they never used it. So the whole place is misty, and there's loads of different types of mist and different types of like, environment. You start off on like a massive redwood forest with those, vast trees that are like, 15 meters across and 500 meters tall. And, that's kind of beautiful. And then, sunlight streams between them and it catches the mist in this amazing way. I think it's just like, we've had loads of fog in games before because it used to be the de facto way of limiting draw distance. But this is like, when it's foggy, it's not because it's clipping off what they don't want you to see. It's actually because the light itself is catching the fog. Like, without the light, the fog isn't obscuring anything. And it just gives it this soft quality to the lighting that just has me screenshotting it constantly. I just can't stop. And every new type of lighting is beautiful in a new way. Like, when it's nighttime, the moonlight coming through that mist is amazing. And then when you see like torchlight at night coming through that mist, it's amazing. And then when you see moonlight meeting torchlight, that's amazing.
Wow.
I know. I feel like I'm on drugs because this game is just like absolutely captivating me in a way that it doesn't seem to be anybody else, or at least I've had a couple of people on Twitter kind of say the same thing to me, but reviews, at least almost all of them were, the highest I saw it get was like 8 out of 10. And nobody really talked about like the world being stunningly beautiful. And so I feel like I've like I'm playing on a secret graphic setting or something, where it's just like, holy shit, just look at every scene of this game.
I suspect everyone else was playing a game which was basically Far Cry in terms of its UI and mechanics and plot, perhaps, where you solved every problem with your totally overpowered animal companions and didn't have to engage with any of the systems. It's not to, like, I mean, it's not to say that anyone's take on it is wrong, really. It's like, as a reviewer, you tend not to switch off things because you're there to review the game the designer's made.
Yeah.
So, like, just, I'm going to flat out, like, if you were reviewing a game, you would never switch subtitles off if it meant you couldn't see the writing.
Yeah.
Because you're there to assess the writing. Like, you wouldn't, you take the game as it is delivered to you. Not to say that what you've done is wrong, because it sounds right, but it also sounds like maybe they should have been braver with it and said, this is the game it should be.
Yeah.
Like,
I really wish they had, actually. There's a bunch of stuff where, I am customizing the game to my preferences, but I'm not able to do that quite right because to find your way to an objective, there's an option called, they do give you loads of options to the interface. You can toggle off every individual element, but one of them is called world icons, and that means when you have an objective, it shows you where it is in the world. And if you don't have that, you have to keep going back to your map. And even if you do that, sometimes your objective is like a stone on the floor, and there's just no way of knowing what it is unless you have world icons on. But world icons are also the most ugly, cluttery thing that just ruins the look of the game. And so I just literally have to go into the menus every 5 minutes and turn them on and then turn them off again and turn them on and turn them off again. And if they just solve that problem for me and a couple of other little UI issues, then they could make that the standard way to play and it would be so much better.
Shall we do Dick Facts from Dick Facts?
Knob fact number 2. In 1993, John and Lorena Bobbitt rose to prominence when Lorena cut off her husband's penis with a knife. This has led to the colloquial name for the Bobbitt worm, a terrifying sea creature which disturbingly looks like a penis wielding knives.
Is this a real animal?
It is, and it can attack larger fish with such power that it will chop them in half.
It's just like a penis holding knives.
It
does have arms?
It's a large polychaete worm with a scissor-like jaw that lurks. It buries itself, lurking jaws upright, and then attacks fish that go overhead.
Right. And maybe I've seen
Jesus. But so it looks like a dick with scissors.
Yeah, it's one of those never get in the sea ever again.
Yeah.
Christ.
I have a knob fact, actually. Now that you mention it, there's a creature that lives in the Amazon River, that, I can't quite remember what it's designed to do, but what it will do to a human is swim into your urethra. And it's incredibly long and slender, and it has barbs. And once it's inside there, it sticks out its barbs, and then it just latches onto you and...
That's the thing that can literally swim up the flow of urine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it maybe goes into fish's gills normally or something. I don't think it's designed for human penises, but it can sure take care of human penises.
Yep.
So never swim in the Amazon.
I'm right.
I've been thinking about that recently because I'm playing Far Cry Primal, and every time I go into a body of water, I'm terrified of the giant fish because I'm terrified of giant fish. I'm a little bit scared of crocodiles, but I'm also just thinking, if this was really prehistoric times, I'd be worried about the thing that swims up your penis.
That was all around there.
I think so.
There's probably fewer of them then, or we would have never happened. Like, evolution would have taken right care of us.
I guess. Funny enough, one of the things that would have been still around in those days is malaria, but it isn't.
That's true.
Which was in Far Cry 2. Could have had a cameo.
I've also been playing Shardlight.
Oh yeah.
Which is the the latest point-and-click adventure from Wadget Eye. Wadget Eye?
I've been saying Wadget.
I've been saying Wadget as well.
Them who've done Gemini Rue and Techno Babylon most recently. And it's another apocalyptic story. Which means I love it. It's been about 20 years since some terrible event, and the world has been ravaged by war and some sort of plague called green lung. And
Jesus.
You're playing a mechanic called Amy Wellard, who's scraping out an existence by taking lottery jobs from an authoritarian government. And these are the only way that you can get, for the lower classes at least, to get a vaccine which will potentially cure this green lung thing. You have to go off and do nasty, horrible, dangerous jobs and get your ticket and, hopefully then get some vaccine. And you discover The initial story goes along, and you discover a man who puts you on a quest in which you encounter conspiracies, rebellions, and using things from your inventory on other things. In the classic fashion. And
it's good
great.
This can be solved that way, because you'd be in trouble otherwise.
Tom just combined things with other things.
I did. I combined Jim Beam whiskey with something called
Crate.
Cocktail Crate Craft Mixer, which is an old-fashioned mixer.
Sorry, go on, John.
Yeah, Wadjet Eye have been quietly producing just amazing point and clicks, just sort of quietly for a long time now. Dave Gilbert, who founded the company's initial games, were stuff like the Shiva and the Blackwell Chronicles.
Yeah.
And he was just there doing amazing work while Kickstarter was saying, we're bringing back point and click games, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, that must have been annoying for him.
And this one is actually by a new addition to their team, a guy called Francisco Gonzalez, I believe. Yes, sorry. Who's made independent games before, but this is his first as a lead in Wadjet Eye. And I think it's going to be great. I'm mostly interested because it's a kind of unique vision of a post-apocalypse. It's been relatively close to the event that triggered all this. And in a nice twist, the authoritarian government all dress like 17th century French revolutionary aristocrats, to the point where even their gas masks look like porcelain faces that they painted on top.
Oh my God.
Stuff like that. And it's great to have kind of an apocalypse with a slightly European feel. We've had a lot of American apocalypses.
I just imagine you saying it's in the apocalypse. It's great to have an apocalypse that's European for once, isn't it?
Had a lot of Russian apocalypses.
Why should those guys have all the world-ruining fun?
I want an apocalypse. But I think the design is great, and the puzzles flow nicely and are novel and don't get in the way. But the reason I mention it is because this is possibly the final generation of Wadjet Eye's games on a venture game simulator. And their artist Ben Chandler has refined the art to a point where, this is going to make me sound like a prick again, he's broken pixel art. It's kind of strange because their game is very low res, like 640 by 320, and he's got an amazing sense, he's an amazing talent, he's got an amazing sense of style, of colour, of composition, that sort of thing, but he works the images so much that they no longer look like pixel art, they look like low res, high quality art. I don't know if that makes sense.
I've heard that used as a criticism of pixel art sometimes. Like there are some artists who carefully consider every pixel and stylize it, and then other artists I've heard games criticized for being like, oh, this is just like good art downsized.
I think that's my problem summed up better.
All right, so there's actually a negative.
Yeah, like in my preference, pixel art is meant to be abstract. I think one of my major influences is sword and sorcery.
Yeah.
To the point where someone's face is 4 pixels.
Yeah.
And their leg is 1 pixel by 5 pixels. And it's incredibly abstract, and you can read a lot in.
Yeah.
You bring a lot to it yourself, and it doesn't feel like low-res game. In fact, sword and sorcery could do with less pixels on the screen. It's so, its shapes and silhouettes are so strong that it doesn't even need the detail that it has there already.
How do you feel? Sorry, it's a bit of an aside, but how do you feel about Undertale's art?
I think that gets an excuse because it's specifically channeling classic NES games. I don't connect with it that much because I'd never really played NES.
Yeah, me
stuff.
neither. It sprung to mind because I remember actually from the trailer more than the game. It mixes pixel resolutions, so it'll have super low res stuff and then have higher res pixel art on top of it, or things that rotate and stuff that don't obey the sort of rules of pixel art.
Okay, that would make me angry.
Yeah, I remember you not being a fan of that.
That's a clash of texel rates, and that gets you a caning from your art director. So. But yeah, I kind of brought Shardlight. I think it's going to be great, and it's going to be out by the time this podcast goes out.
All right.
I kind of brought it up to fight about point and clicks with the Crate and Crowbar, because you've all said some harsh but very fair things about it.
What have we? I can't remember what I've said about it.
I mean, I know Graham and I have talked before, probably on the pod, about puzzles in point and clicks, and just how they're basically garbage.
Yeah,
like,
puzzles are
I mean,
basically garbage.
we talk about Broken Age a bunch, and I like those games, but I play them with a walkthrough, and I almost at the point where I play any adventure game with a walkthrough, or I would not, like, right up front, I would wait until I get stuck, but as soon as I get stuck, I will look at a walkthrough, whereas in something like The Witness, when I get stuck, I did actually look at a walkthrough eventually in The Witness, but for 90% of The Witness, when I got stuck, I thought, okay, there's something I'm missing here, and it's going to be logical, and when I get it, I'll be like, and I don't have that trust with adventure games anymore, because so many of them have broken it so badly.
Yeah.
You know, so often the solution is something fucking ridiculous. In fact, I played on the Blackwell Legacy games, and I can't remember enough about the puzzle to actually properly critique it, but the solution involved, I was supposed to realize that if I had got this guy who had a dog on a leash and, like, walked around a lamppost 6 times, that would have wrapped his leash around the lamppost 6 times, and that would have in some way ensnared the dog and allowed me to do something that,
Right.
like, the only reason my character needed to do it is I couldn't persuade her to just do it normally.
Yeah. Those Mind of the Designer puzzles are bad. I think Wadget gets it better than most. But even like Tim Schafer told a story about Day of the Tentacle, where they had, if you remember the Dead Cousin Ted puzzle line, where you have to get a mummy ready for like a beauty contest in the future, something like that. And it's one of those things that you're 90% sure was made to generate revenue from tips lines. And they had the sequence of instructions on how to complete this puzzle, on a cabinet in the office. And one of their own producers walked past and read it and said, "This is why nobody likes point and click adventures."
I mean, yeah, watching the Double Fine documentary, which is great, by the way, you can see moments that frustrated me in Act 2. I can see, I can't remember who it was, but one of the developers playing it, and when he's playing it, he fucks up in exactly the same way I fucked up, and can't click on the right thing at the right, there's a timing puzzle in space where something's rotating and you've got to click a thing at the right time, and he screws it up like 4 times, and I can see him getting really irritated, and I just want to say, like, spot it now, and take it out.
So strangely, I had Charles Cecil on the live stream on Sunday, who's the creator of Broken Sword and Beneath the Steel Sky, who's putting out a box set of Revolution games going back 25 years, because that studio's now 25 years old, and they're doing a box set, which is every game Revolution made, so the entire Broken Sword series, and Beneath the Steel Sky, and Lure of the Temptress, and one of the other ones. And we got on to talking about, it was really, he'd never actually, it was a weird unboxing. If you're a fan of weird unboxing, because obviously he's of that generation of British game developers that helped sort of define a corner of the business that they worked in at the time. But he'd never seen this box set before that he was working on. And the PR just had like one of the first off the press brought over from Germany. So he was genuinely opening it for the first time. And I think he was more into it than anybody present or possibly watching, because you just, wow, look at this poster, and completely genuine enthusiasm. But we got talking about, sort of, I asked him sort of like, does he feel like, you know, the adventure game is sort of, it's made a case for its return, certainly, with things like, he brought up Her Story and Life is Strange and stuff like that. But there are things that you'd leave in the past. Like, in the era of Google, you can't design for the tips line anymore. You can't design for the magazine. You have to accept that if something's hard, people will just bypass it. That kind of thing. He ended up, in response to that, telling a story about the goat puzzle in Broken Sword 1, which is I don't think I've played Broken Sword 1, but I've read about it enough times to
It
feel
was like a nightmare timing puzzle in which you had to get past a goat on a rope by distracting it.
Yeah.
Or it would run into you and knock you back and stuff like that.
So it's one of those things where it's a combination of arbitrary gating mechanic, where it's like, a goat won't, you know, that's not a goat isn't an obstruction to human progress in the way the wall is. You know what I mean? Like, there would be other ways around this, but also a very difficult puzzle. And he said that, they did that at the time because, you wanted to make most of the game kind of fine for people who just wanted to cruise through it, but every game had its super hardcore fans. And those people expect a hard puzzle. Those people expect something that you really, really have to work at, or else they won't feel like they got their money's worth. So he said, I think he said this in the sense that this wasn't the right decision, but like, we deliberately threw like a real fucking curveball in there for the really hardcore fans. But the problem is that this isn't like an optional challenge stage. This isn't Tom deciding to play Far Cry with the UI off in order to get the experience he wants. This is literally gating the progress of every single person who'll play it with something that even the developer knows is bollocks. And ultimately, obviously I respect his viewpoint, but ultimately his argument is kind of like, well, we have some real fans of bollocks. So we have to make sure the fans of bollocks get what they want from the game. Therefore, we put some bollocks in it, in amongst the non-bollocks, significant non-bollocks segments. But yeah, so I still don't think there's a case for it really, like that kind of design, but
I think they admitted that in the subsequent re-release of Broken Sword 1, they tweaked the difficulty of that. Before even this box set, they said, no, the goat is too far.
It's a goat too far.
It was the most bollocks thing they'd done.
Double Fine actually ran a live tips helpline for Broken Age on its launch night, I think, or sometime around launch, where like all the developers are sitting on a call, and it was actually like a real number that you could just call and talk to them and ask them how to get past a certain bit. It was free, I think.
I do love these games for their art and what they can do narratively and so on. But I don't know. I'd like to hear your take on this, John. Like, my feeling is that the challenge element is increasingly irrelevant in a world that has accepted that games don't need a challenge to be games and so on.
I completely agree with that. I think, for me, a lot of the time the criticism is, why isn't this a book or a film or something like that? If you just want to tell a story, if you don't want to have dynamic mechanics, which can lead to different outcomes, why not just write it out as a story? And that's entirely reasonable, except for the fact that even basic interaction with the environment is enough to ground you in a fantasy, at least for me. A lot of games you'll run through just shooting stuff or walking up to whatever is waypointed on your screen and pressing use and moving along, and that does nothing for me. But to use one of the early Shardlight puzzles to get some information off a plate which is corroded and unreadable, like finding some paper somewhere and then rubbing a crayon across it, something to actually get the information off. If I interact with the environment to that degree and use lots of new and interesting things in strange ways, it grounds me in the reality of that fiction, and it makes the story as a whole a lot better. And it can you also get the opportunity to do Dark Souls type environmental storytelling. You just feed little bits of fiction in descriptions and observations that your character makes about the world. You can go through a hyper detailed, like Gears of War, say, was beautiful environment with a lot of storytelling built into its art, and you can go through and you can look at all that and enjoy it. But if a character goes through and comments on it, then you learn something about the character as well as the world, and it's just a really sort of efficient way to tell story and character for me.
Did you play Oxenfree, by the way?
Not yet.
I think you'd like that. It's an interesting kind of middle ground in that it's not, stuff like Gone Home and also Firewatch have no puzzles, really. They have combination locks. That's about as puzzly as it gets, and you're told the combination. And those work without it. But Oxenfree has puzzles, kind of. But I suppose it doesn't, actually. You have a radio, and you have to set a radio to a certain frequency to kind of sometimes listen to something, sometimes unlock doors, and sometimes interact with the supernatural. And the radio does all three of those things. And there are tenuous reasons why. But that felt like an adventure game to me, in that I don't know if I had that kind of like aha moment of solving puzzles, but it was different to Gone Home and Firewatch in that, it didn't feel like a purely story thing. It felt like I was having to do something to progress and there are some time loop things that, I don't know, like the way you solve it isn't clever or like a puzzle solution exactly, but you have to do something. And like you say, like just having a certain amount of engagement with it made it, feel more like a thing that was happening to me. And also, it has all, it's great at conversations basically. It's it's the game that goes all out on just, here are like 4 or 5 people and here's all of their relationships and you can explore every aspect of it and all of them will talk to each other at some point and you can express preferences about who you like and who you don't like and that will come back. Do you have any more knob facts?
Let's have a knob fact.
I have one more knob fact. During the Victorian panic, when they removed the offending penises of statues for reasons of propriety, the cast of Michelangelo's David in England survived mutilation after a detachable plaster fig leaf was constructed, which could be attached via hooks. So, this was deployed so as not to shock the Queen during one of her visits.
That's amazing.
They literally patched it.
Yeah, they patched the cock.
That's where the phrase spatchcock comes from. Shall we do questions from questions?
Yeah. Why not?
We've gotten increasingly suspicious about that question. The answer's obviously going to be yes, but maybe we don't need to sound quite so unsure.
Maybe we should switch it to just like someone says, we will now do questions from questions.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because we're going to, aren't we? I mean, John didn't even get a say. He might not want to.
I've run out of knob facts. I've checked out.
Fair enough. Via Serif writes, Dear Crate and Crowbar, I've noticed that games tend to have a weird relationship with food, treating it purely as a sort of body fuel situation where the point of eating is not to keel over from starvation, rather than the many, many reasons we have for eating, especially communally. Cooking, likewise, is a question of time management or totally elided. So my question is, have there been any games that manage to convey some sense of those other aspects of food and cooking, e.g. community, the skill of picking out a meal, etc.? Are there any foods or cooking methods from a game that you'd like to see in real life? Failing that, do any of you have a good soup recipe?
I don't have a good soup recipe, but I thought of 12 minutes while listening to this question, which is the game by Luis Antonio, which I've mentioned before, who's the artist on The Witness. A artist on The Witness. And it's a game where you live the same 12 minutes again and again, and it always ends badly, at least as far as I played. But there's one of the things I try to do within those 12 minutes is like you come home from work and your wife is, I think in the bathroom or something, or in some way unavailable, and it's, you can either not talk to her or you can talk to her, or you can kind of search your own apartment, but there's also like a meal that she's been cooking that isn't quite ready, and you can go and lay the table and serve the meal if you like. And I think I wanted to do that and I semi-fucked it up by, I don't know, I think I put the soup in the bowls, but then I only put the spoons down and maybe I didn't put the spoons down at all. And then when I just sat down to kind of like trigger the meal happening, and then she noticed the spoons went out, and so she had to go and get the spoons, and so she said some guy, like, sort of barbed comment about, like, oh, thanks for laying the table, but, it would have been nice if you got the cutlery out as well. And so that is a game in which, like, just getting the meal ready and just, like, having it, taking care of it gets you some kind of credit, and doing that not at all gets you no credit at all, and doing it partially gets you partial credit. So the social aspect of serving food is reflected.
I think BioWare have done this in a few games now, where they've been, and I really like it when they do it, where they'll build a sequence around something kind of domestic, usually like meal related, the characters are doing. Something they've got more interested in over time. So there's a very good extended sequence in, Dragon Age Inquisition, where the entire party goes to the pub. And it's kind of, this is also a drinking as well as eating sequence, but it does have that kind of social atmosphere of like, you and 8 of your mates going for a curry, like, although, in the tavern in your fortress. And It's used to basically tell stories and stuff and skip along through the evening. But it's really nicely done. Like, it feels like that should feel, in terms of who's there and how they react and how comfortable they are in that situation. It uses that domestic setting that's really familiar to highlight how different those characters are and stuff. You sort of choose how your own character participates in it. Like, you can sort of open up a bit about your own backstory, like preceding the events at the start of the game, and have your character attempt to tell a funny story from their own life, which fleshes you out as someone in that world. But, Varric, who's the dwarf with the crossbow in that game, who's also a companion in Dragon Age 2, tells a story from Dragon Age 2, which is something you will have actually done if you played one of the DLCs for Dragon Age 2. He tells with embellishments, which is kind of just like a really nice, it's a nice way of throwing back to something without actually like having it be like apocalyptic stakes for previous decision. It just changes, well, actually it doesn't. There's a nice little Easter egg there where, regardless of how you actually handled the situation in the story about the previous protagonist that he tells, his version of the dialogue is always as if you picked the sarcastic option in Dragon Age 2, because he'll always say he's telling the funny version of that story,
right,
where you could have played it straight or you could have played it like angry or something. But there are one-liners in that the main character can say, and in Varric's version of the story, they always did say them, which is kind of nice. And it happens in Mass Effect 3 Citadel as well, with the party at the end of that. And it's maybe a stretch of the question, but it does speak a lot to the communal aspect of hanging out to eat and drink. And there's a really good line in Mass Effect 2 when you're talking to Thane, I think, which is about how isolated Thane feels at mealtime on the Normandy, because he's never ever actually traveled with other people before. He's always traveled alone. And in that game, they don't actually show mealtime on the Normandy, but the fact that they kind of imply it as a thing that happens, I really like. I can't think of a game that does actual cooking well, though.
I think we had a question before about like cooking games, and we talked about Cook Serve Delicious. But in terms of like eating as a mechanic, this is not at all what the questioner meant, I think. But the game Dungeon Siege, I think it might be like Dungeon Siege 2 or whatever the last one in that series was. You could have a companion that was like a golem of some kind, and when you found loot that you didn't really care about, you could feed it to your golem, and its properties would sort of inform its development. So if you fed it a lot of axes, it would do more damage, and if you fed it a lot of armor, it would become more, maybe it was a metal golem, it would become tougher. And so you'd kind of like define its development by what you made it eat.
I can't think of communal cookery mechanics, but just asking about video game food made me remember the Tumblr, I think, of a very talented chef who recreates foods from video games in real life.
Oh, yeah.
And specifically, I'm remembering the sweet roll from Skyrim, which looks like a kind of volcanic donut covered in icing, and their replication of that on the blog was fantastic.
Is this gourmet gaming?
Yeah, something like that. I think they did things like mana potions and things as well.
Yeah, they do great stuff. Far Cry Primal, a game I haven't talked about nearly enough on this podcast. Weirdly, the healing system is replaced by eating meat, and it's just meat wrapped in different leaves. And if you wrap it in like one green leaf, it heals 3 points, and if you wrap it in 2 green leaves, it heals 5 points. But if you wrap it in a purple leaf, it makes you camouflage from animals, and so all like the buffs are tied to healing. But it's the thing that's slightly annoying about it is that previous Far Cry games were great about when you get injured, the heal button makes you pull a piece of shrapnel out of your hand or fix your broken arm by snapping it back or do these horribly like visceral, awful things to yourself. And that's still in there technically, but you only ever see it if you run out of meat, and you never run out of meat because just everything you kill gives you loads of meat and you've always got loads of it. And so it's just a question of like, what leaf do you want to wrap your meat in? And that determines what happens.
It's like the absurd Bioshock thing of like, I've been slightly injured, quick hoover the apples out of the bin and I'll be fine.
They really you can't avoid it mechanically. If you get injured, you have to just take a bite of raw meat wrapped in a leaf to survive. Like, the pulling things out of your arm doesn't work. You've got to actually eat some meat whilst being attacked by a jaguar.
I mean, the alternative for a game set in, mankind's ancient past is that you've broken your leg. You'll now die.
Yeah, that would be great, actually.
JR writes, Dear CNC, firstly, when will Bannerlord be on? Secondly, given RPS and noted RPS fanzine PC gamer, I would note, as Chris, a joke that gets increasingly old over time. Giving let's say, increased investment and interest in the UK convention scene, the Weekender being a prime example, what does the podcast feel is the long-term prospect for gaming conventions in general? Big names leaving E3 to do their own event, and the general abundance of British indies suggests that there might be the beginnings of a sustainable event scene in the UK and the US that doesn't smell like Doritos and sadness, and definitely doesn't have lizard-like CEOs attempting to relate to me while wearing a suit that costs more than my house. But I would like to hear your views on what the future of conventions and PC gaming events might look like. He then signs off, I will drink from your skull. JR.
What a pleasant listener.
P.S. Thanks for a great hosting job, Chris. I've been glued to the Weekender stream the whole way through. Thank you, JR. Don't drink from my skull. Take them.
It's great that the PCG Weekender was a success, cause it kind of feels like the event scene in the UK is in a way better place than it's ever been, really, cause, Eurogamer, definitely, took some important steps in that. There used to be, back when I was in sixth form, shortly after high school, I was working on a sort of mod that we're trying to make into an official game, and as part of that we got to go to the biggest UK trade show at the time, which was the UK version of E3, which is called ECTS.
I don't remember that. I think I went to one of them.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of the listeners probably don't remember that and probably never experienced it. But yeah, it was E3 and ECTS, and those were the two big shows. And that just completely stopped at some point. And it was kind of great. I think I played Diablo 2, way ahead of launch at that event, and it was just like a little mini E3. But it's good that there was a gap, that died, and then it was quite a while before, EGX started, or, these days we have both EGX and Rezzed is just, Eurogamer's thing for indie games. And it's a pretty great thing, actually, that, there's an indie games only show in London every year that, Heatsignature will be at it next month. Just a cool thing that you go and play some games at in the UK. And every time I go to one of these things in the UK, I always, meet a bunch of Crate and Crowbar listeners, and meet a bunch of people who've, followed the Game Maker tutorials I did, and just a bunch of people who I would never meet otherwise, who exist out there, and, it's just really nice to put, a human face on them. And yeah, it sounds like PCG Weekender is, another big step in that direction.
I heard someone describe it, and I actually haven't been to a Rezzed, because I haven't been to an event for a while. On my last time I started going to these events, it was just Eurogamer Expos. Someone described the Weekender who's more familiar with that as somewhere between the two, and I think that really changed the tone of the event. I think there's a few things that were accidents for us that I'd like to repeat. One is that the event was 18+, which is actually initially the decision we made because there were so many games that had an age limit on them that doing what sometimes happens at the Eurogamer Expo, where you split things into an 18+ section and an everything else section, it wasn't proportionally weighted. Because obviously we were a little bit beholden to what PC games are coming out at that time. And there was such a disproportionate weighting towards things at the higher upper end of the age limit spectrum that we couldn't offer a good show to younger people.
Yeah.
And so it was we'll make the whole thing 18+ then, so to avoid having a situation where some kids come along and they can't actually play anything. But a consequence of that is the atmosphere, combined with it being a bit light and airy and a little bit more mature. It felt a lot nicer than I'm used to at those events. People weren't being dicks about stuff. And that's just teenagers, right? It's just kids are assholes. And it was really nice having an environment where everyone, obviously, maturity has to come in air quotes in the games industry, because when you're talking about, we have 18 rated games, we're talking about, we have games where you disembowel a zombie. It's not necessarily mature in that way, but simply having everyone be older, I think really helped. But the other thing is that being on a PC show meant that, honestly, I don't think Activision, Ubisoft, EA had that much interest in us. Which was great, because it meant that the highest profile publisher there was probably Sega, who in a PC sense is probably a mid-level publisher. They had Relic and Creative Assembly there, which are big deals on the PC, but they're not really big deals anywhere else. Wargaming there, who's obviously a huge deal on PC, but not a massive deal anywhere else. Tripwire, like Tripwire had a big presence, and it's like Tripwire are not the kind of developer that would dominate a Eurogamer Expo necessarily. Something like Killing Floor or Rising Storm.
Yeah.
But they're kind of interesting PC games, and as a result, you end up with a bit of a diversity of things. You get sort of like indie feeling non-indie games as well as indie games, which I think is what sort of contributed to feel it's falling somewhere in the middle. And it's a sort of, I would always be the first person to argue that you shouldn't get precious about what platform you play games on. And that maybe you shouldn't segregate game events into like, oh, this is the PC event and this is the Xbox event, or whatever. But there was definitely a weighting to that event that we could only achieve because we didn't need to make space for the big multi-platform stuff.
Yeah.
You can give a room to Master of Orion.
I noticed that the Mountain Blade stuff did really well on Reddit. Like, there were 2 different stories on Reddit that
it was crazy.
Did huge numbers.
I loved that game originally, and what they're doing looks really cool. But like, we had
probably all that hype from Stream Chat telling you that Bannerlord was going to be on.
But like, we had 7,000 concurrent viewers for Mountain Blade, which is kind of nuts for any live stream. Like, and this was a YouTube gaming live stream, so it's not necessarily the platform people are normally used to going to for this sort of thing. Like, it's surprising. Like, the demand was definitely there. Like, it's nice to see a game like that getting crazy hype. You know, like, when we did the PC Gamer show last year, which was when we introduced a PC E3 show to E3, going the opposite direction to all the publishers, apparently. You know, chat was full of absolute outrage that we weren't announcing Half-Life 3. And we never promised to. It's just that, you know, something that thought that formed for me this weekend, this is unrelated, but it's obvious, but like, it never formed for me in this way, is that the internet completely removes the meaning of perspective, which is actually harder to hold on to the more time you spend in the real world. Like, Occam's razor is one of those theories that you think probably is universally applicable, that the simplest solution is always the right one. It doesn't apply on the internet at all, because simple doesn't mean anything. Everything is simple because facts and lies are exactly the same. And so all it takes for something to be accepted as truth on the internet is for someone to have said it and someone else to want to believe it. It takes nothing more than that.
Yeah. The Steam forums around Gunpoint's launch were a great example of this, where like someone posted that like, oh, I completed the game in like 40 minutes and I think $10 is too much for 40 minutes. And then the entire thread was about whether $10 is too much for 40 minutes. Nobody else checked and found out that the game is actually like 3 hours long and 40 minutes is like a speed run. And then the other biggest thread on the Gunpoint forums ever was a petition to add Steam Workshop support to the level editor, which was an announced thing from the first moment that the level editor even existed. I had already announced I was going to do that. And there was a petition to persuade me to do the thing I was already said I was going to do. And like, there's 800 posts or something, and like post 756 is me posting to say, yeah, I'm still going to do this thing I said I was already going to do, like, before the date of the first post of this.
Exactly. Like, in the case of the E3 show chat being bombarded by people demanding Half-Life 3, you sort of see it as expected because, even though we never promised it, it's an obvious thing to demand if you just go to the obvious thing to demand from a PC show. Chat losing their shit this weekend, waiting for Bannerlord, which again, like, someone had probably posted on Twitter, say, hey, it's today, and they were wrong. That person was just incorrect. But because the people wanted that to be true more than the other thing, that's what they rioted about. It's nice to see, basically, I guess what I'm saying is, it's nice to see that grade of fucking mob mania for what would be a kind of mid-band PC exclusive, very niche medieval combat strategy game, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, taking as granted that people will always be going fucking crazy for no reason about something. It's nice to see them going fucking crazy for no reason about something that specific.
Yep.
What a heartwarming kind of... Another question, this time, from somebody who doesn't leave that name. So, dear mans, and maybe by this point one lady.
No, sorry.
Last week there was a question about incorporating unusual sensations into games, including pain. Most of you seem to have pretty sane opinions on this. I, however, would like to offer dissent with an example.
With an insane opinion.
Remember that stupid X-ray vision in Dishonored that made the stealth trivial? Well, that thing really hurt my eyes and stuff. I could feel a strain, sort of, behind my eyes, which increased the longer I used it, and also felt more and more nauseous. This meant that I always felt like using this otherwise bollocks and OP power was completely justified, because it felt kind of immersive to have to spend my own personal mental effort to continuously use it. And this also gave me a completely natural reason to turn the bloody ugly thing off until I particularly needed it. The only thing that would have made it cooler is if I got a psychic nosebleed like they do in the X-Men and stuff. It would look really hardcore, so legit, and so rad. Or maybe potentially breaking my eyes was stupid. I don't know, it seemed fun at the time. Fans were in mini. P.S. An appropriately themed goodbye to Marty the Dark Soul Davies. Sadness, but hurrah for quite something. P.P.S. Hello Pip, you're real neat, she'll be here later. Sorry.
Cry Primal has this problem. It has a vision mode that's grey and yellow. And it, like, you turn it on and it's useful. It shows you important things, but then it's ugly as shit. And so it turns itself off after like 10 seconds. And then you've got to turn it back on again if you needed it. And yeah, this is a problem game designers need to solve soon. Cause like, you can't have a vision mode that just makes your game look shit. And then try and like bribe the player to not use it. Like, if you want to let us have this ability, you got to find a way to make the ability look good.
Magic Vision modes can fucking do one.
Yep.
I think the best thing about VR developers trying so hard to work out what causes motion sickness and uncomfortableness when looking through 3D goggles and so on is that they can later deploy them whenever they want to.
Yeah, that's true.
It's going to be nosebleeds for everyone.
Yeah, you could really make people throw up in VR if you wanted to. Like, just put a 1 second lag in between what they're doing with their head and what you show them. That'd be amazing, actually. Like, if you get smashed around the head with a club in, say, Cry Primal.
Jesus Christ.
I am being paid by Ubisoft. This is all completely marketing. You could, just like as a stun effect, having it add a lag to a VR headset would be brutal. That'd be horrible. You actually, probably people won't do that because the motion sickness problem is A, really severe for some people, and B, very variable from person to person. Right. So, like, I've never had it with VR, but some people have had it with every kind of VR, and the majority of people have it with this kind of VR, but not that kind of VR.
There's an excellent GIF, which I put in the show notes, which was doing the rounds lately, which is of someone using an Oculus Rift in like a shopping mall. He's got a friend behind him. Do you guys see this? It's fucking great. He's playing what looks like a kind of roller coaster game, but he's standing. So he's got his headset on. He's kind of looking down because his character's about to sort of crest the top of a roller coaster. And as he gets to the top of the roller coaster, the person standing behind him in real life gives him an incredibly light shove. Enough to make your body feel like whatever you were on, you're about to fall off, but like not enough to like knock someone over in real life. Like just a little nudge in the back. And he falls over for what I can only describe as forever. Like, his actual mind breaks by the looks of things. Yeah. And he continues to fall over in real life for a long fucking time.
It's incredible because, like, his immediate reaction is exactly what you expect, which is like, he's really surprised that he's falling over in real life as well as in the game, and so he reacts to that, and then it just goes on and on and on. He just can't recover from it. He can't get out of this, like, what the fuck is happening to my life? Like, emergency situation. You're just flailing and thrashing and just...
I think
it's very good.
Somewhat related to that was my first thought when the Vive team announced that they could display the real world.
Yeah.
There's a camera on the front of it so you can see through to what's actually there, is that designers of horror games...
You can make the best horror game, yes! So oh my god, I hadn't thought about that.
By overlaying stuff onto what's really there.
Oh shit, that's so good. Oh man. That's so good, and yet transgresses the very boundaries of everything that you want to establish as trustworthy.
God, VR is such an opportunity to be a giant asshole.
One of the very first VR games for Oculus Rift was a horror game in which the VR simulation is of you in your apartment, and you go and sit down on your sofa and you look at your TV and you play a console game. And the console game is a game that they've also made for you to play, and it takes place on a 2D screen. Even when you're looking through your 3D goggles, it's a 2D screen that you're sitting down in front of. And as you're playing it, you're walking around this very crude... It's a 3D world, but it's, on a 2D screen. and you're walking around it and, you go to the haunted orphanage, and then when you go to the haunted orphanage, you hear like a child's laugh behind you in VR, and people, when they, various scares happen in the sort of VR world that relate to the game you're playing on your console in the fictional world, and when they get scared, they don't take the VR goggles off. They just like stand up and look around. And it's because it's just asking you to invest in this second layer reality. The first layer reality, it never occurs to them that it's not real. And so all of the stuff that happens to them in that reality, because it's so mundane initially, becomes just completely convincing to them. And, when they're terrified and they want to get out of it, they stand up instead of taking the VR goggles off, because they're thinking about the game as being a thing on the screen, and they drop the controller or whatever and get up from that.
Please don't do this to us, VR developers.
Yeah.
Please just make happy games where you draw with light and stuff.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's I don't know how they'd enforce it exactly, but I wouldn't be surprised if Valve/HTC sort of enforced some rule about the chaperone system, where it shows you what the real world is.
Yeah, the chaperone can't lie.
Fuck with that. It has to be real.
You can't just make someone walk into a fucking door.
And then someone will get murdered while they're in VR, and everyone will say, well, if you'd let players believe that was a terrifying thing.
Please define the murderers in your room before you play.
Is it 0 murderers or 1 to 6 murderers?
I have a question here from Rob. You're right. Dear sirs, you have one game to take to your desert island, one game plus DLC, no mods. This is the only game you'll ever play for the rest of your life. What is it? P.S. Thanks for the podcast. I've listened since you started. Excellent work. P.P.S. Am I your oldest listener at 58? P.P.P.S. Yep. My choice was Skyrim.
It's tricky because there's it's kind of a cool thing about games is they blur the boundaries between mods and game. Minecraft is a game where you can make your own systems. People have made computers within Minecraft, and that's not a mod. That's using vanilla Minecraft, but they made a whole new thing. And yeah, you can mess with those games to any extent. And so the question almost becomes like, what's the game that's most moddable without technically being a mod?
I think, well, the obvious answer is Dota. in a serious sense, because, it's an endlessly replayable systems-driven thing that I have found, fascinating to a degree that I've never found any other game fascinating ever. So presumably it would last me. Secondly, because it's an online game, and therefore I could spend every single game I played begging strangers on the internet to send help because I was trapped on a desert island. Also, because by the time I was freed from my desert island, maybe after the course of years, I'd be very good at it, and then could reclaim lost earnings over years of imprisonment on a desert island.
It's a very pragmatic approach
by competing in a major or perhaps the international.
You don't get this on Desert Island Discs. They're not like, if I listen to this David Bowie album enough, I'd become so good at David Bowie that I would make a living for it.
My answer would be Dota 2 as well, if only so I could practice enough that I could complete one game without someone chatting. Shut the fuck up, uninstall Dota 2, nub.
That actually has no correlation with reality. You'll always see that forever. Welcome to Dota.
How do you do it, Dota, John? Are you...
I'm about 1,000 hours into Dota, which means I know absolutely nothing. But that means I know absolutely nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a significant...
Yeah, 1,000 hours is
Donald Rumsfeld with a clue.
Yeah.
So in StarCraft, there's platinum and gold and silver and stuff. Is there...
Dota has MMR, so Dota has Dota system isn't very good, honestly. One of the good things about StarCraft system is it's seasonal, even if over the course of long periods of time. League also has a serious seasonal system, I believe, which means that every now and then it resets everybody and you have to kind of regain your place. I
think I'm about 3k, which is exactly within the bell curve.
Yeah, you and I are in the same position then. Dota has a system where it kind of gives you, it basically exposes your matchmaking rating, which is the sort of, it's the 4-digit number for most people that, the game uses to kind of matchmake you with players of similar skill. But it's a complete grind to change it and a bit of a lottery, but people still get really obsessed with it. And so people talk about players in terms of their 1,000-point bracket. So you'll hear a 2K player, or a 3K player, or a 4K player, or a 5K player. The best players in the world are 8K now, pretty much. 6K is very, very good. And they do sort of map onto percentiles. But that means that almost when you're in the middle band, which is like the 3K to 4K bracket, that bracket represents such a broad swathe of players that it's highly unuseful as a metric, really. I think Dota's ranked system, as angry as it makes people within the community, is actually not very good at all compared to other games at giving you a sense of where you are relative to others.
The reason I
say that as a scrub.
The reason I sort of think about these ranking systems is that I love when I listen to like StarCraft 2 professional commentators and look at some idiot move that someone did that just got them completely killed, and they'll say like, oh man, that's like a platinum level move. And in my mind, platinum is like a really good rating. That's like above gold. And to their mind, it's like, that's the shit level. If you're a fucking idiot, you get platinum.
There's a guy who makes Dota videos on YouTube called Purge, which I think you've talked about on the...
He's a nice man.
Quite well before.
Kevin.
With his lovely voice and lovely moustache, which is sadly no longer with us. But anyway,
he hasn't died, it's just he shaved.
He does very sporadically a series called Purge Casts at Pub, in which he professionally casts a very low-ranked game. Oh. And there's an especially amazing one where this will only make sense to Dota 2 people, but Wraith King buys 6 branches and nothing else at the beginning of the game, and Purge just loses his mind for like 40 minutes. It's fantastic.
Branches are really good. They are the most... They would be the best item in the game if it didn't have finite inventory space. Because on a cost-benefit basis, they give you more stats per gold spent than any other item in the game. It's just they don't give you very much and they're cheap. But if you could stack them forever, then they would be the greatest item in the game and you'd never have to buy anything else.
I was very proud of myself because I read your article, Chris, about the James Harding fiasco.
Oh, that thing, yeah.
And it was very entertaining. But also you made like a Dota joke in it, which I totally got. I was like surprised at myself for getting it. Because you said it was a disaster!
Yeah.
In the voice of, I can't even remember.
Toby One.
Okay, Toby One. And I saw that international, and I watched that moment, and I love that moment.
It's a good moment. That's a $6 million moment for the person who was doing the Dota at the time. Martin writes, Dear CNC, I recently picked up a Steam Link and Steam controller and have experienced a bit of a couch gaming awakening as a result. My wife and I have been having a great time playing co-op Pillars of Eternity, which I bought on your Game of the Year recommendation from the sofa. I'm in charge of the controller and acting out all the dialogue with embarrassing enthusiasm, and she's in charge of picking dialogue options and deciding where we go and what we do there. It's great fun, likely far better for our marriage than playing it alone. My question then is, what other, not technically co-op, but actually really great when played cooperatively games would you recommend that we play together? Thanks for reading, everybody. Martin D. P.S. I'd like to give my sincerest congratulations to March on his new position at Mojang. From one Welsh Martin with the initial D, who's also a professional artist working in the games industry. Wow. I wish you all the best. Although I appreciate actually having just asked that question. Tom, did you have a Desert Island game? I can't remember if...
I mean, I remember saying, I don't know. Like, I want to say Minecraft because it's so extensible, but it's like the boundaries of like, how much online connectivity do we have? Because, you know, Gary's mod can run 1,000 different game modes, including RPGs and all kinds of things. And so can Minecraft, really. And it's just like, what counts as a mod and what counts as just being online play? I don't have a good answer.
So answering that question would at least occupy some of your time on the desert island. But anyway, sorry, to this question. So, co-op games that are actually not co-op games, but are really great when played together.
So, actually, now that he mentions, whatever the hell it was we mentioned, Divinity 2 is kind of, you play as 2 characters, right? No matter what. And so you always have
Divinity Original Sin, which is technically, I think, Divinity 3.
Okay.
Divinity Original Sin 2 is coming out soon. which is technically Divinity 4.
Your two characters talk to each other and you choose all the dialogue options for both parties, and so you could assign one of those characters to you and the other character to whoever you're playing with, and, play essentially co-op in a game that isn't technically co-op.
It is also technically co-op.
Okay, it's also technically co-op.
Like, that game has full co-op that works in exactly that way, and that you just actually have two characters and you play them separately, which is also brilliant.
Sense.
Like, actually, to be honest, if you had two Steam controllers, let's say, I think it should have the same screen play. If it doesn't, that's stupid. But it's great. So.
Yeah, you could almost do it anyway, because it's like the actual combat itself has some kind of, I can't remember if it's turn-based or pause-based, but you have as much time as you like to decide what each character does. So if you were playing with two players, you could, say, you get to decide what this character does, and I decide what that character does.
Yeah, there's a real bitterness in that game that comes to the other person winning the rock, paper, scissors game you play, to make you choose who wins the decisions.
Oh yeah, because you can choose conflicting options, and then it...
Yeah. Like, Pip and I are slowly making our way through it, or were a while ago, and we killed some completely innocent guards for no reason that I could see, because she wanted to, and she won rock, paper, scissors, and I had to kind of like, I'm like playing as like the support mage, and so I just had to stand at the back and heal and help. Well, we just fucking killed some innocent people.
I don't believe in this.
I'm not into this.
I don't think that's a co-op game, personally. I have infinite fun arguing with myself.
Yeah.
And I look forward to the sequel where it's 4-player. I can split my brain into 4 parts and use one of those to actively sabotage the questing of the other 3.
I don't know why they've decided to do this to their own game, but it's amazing that they did. I would actually suggest something like Life is Strange for this. That's a good game to sit on a couch and play with somebody else and make the decisions together. Yeah.
We played FTL, as a kind of couch co-op thing where it works, like, this is a game where you sort of fight through 10 or 12 different phases of a galaxy, and you decide what to buy and what to equip your ship with, and whether to attack this pirate vessel or whether to pass them by. And it works remarkably well as a kind of voting system, like, no matter how many players you have, anything from like 2 to 20 or whatever. And you can just sort of run it as a council and just say like, okay, in this situation, what should we do? And you need like a de facto leader who can, there are certain situations where it's like, it's not worth having 20 votes on whether we fire now or not. It's clear we should fire, and they just have that person fire. But, yeah, we did this on New Year's Eve, and we had like, it was hours long, the game. It went on a really long time, and it was really close and nail biting. I don't think we completed the game, but we got really, really far, and we had our own like pike laser thing that we were fucking obsessed with. And
was it just fire the glaive?
Oh, it was glaive.
It was a glaive laser.
And every time anyone said anything threatening to us, we would just be like, "Smell the glaive!"
Yeah.
Everyone would vote to fire the glaive at them.
Yeah, smell the glaive was the, that was the thing we shouted.
It might have even been a podcast title at the time.
Mihai writes, "Hi from Romania. Firstly, I'd like to know that I'm extremely angry at Graham and Marsh for leaving.
Yeah, fuck
I don't understand why their personal accomplishments should stand between me and my entertainment. On the flip side, I'm happy to see Pip as a regular. I was thinking recently that as a programmer, the only thing that stops me from working from the couch or a beanbag is the limited space of my 13-inch laptop monitor. So then I figured VR. I'd love to see a VR software for Oculus or Vive that lets you have desktop screens, or just one that spans across your view, all around you, and code while sitting comfortably on the couch. To my question, what gaming technologies have you used or would you use in non-gaming scenarios such as work, learning, or doing chores? I'm sure you get this all the time, but I'm a huge fan of the podcast. It's been my favourite way to start the weekend since its inception. Cheers, Mihai."
That's an amazing idea.
It's just a great idea. I don't know if I have an answer to this, but it's a great idea.
I don't have a better idea than that. It's just that, I also use a laptop for programming all the time, and it is a problem that it doesn't support resolution, and I'd never thought about the fact that VR would solve the problem. I guess maybe it might be it might also be a problem on laptops, because VR, as I understand it, like the thing that makes you sick is the lack of fidelity, right? It's when it's not running at maximum frame rate, or when it's not able to fulfill your whole field of view, or various other like technical flaws. That's what makes you motion sickness. That's what makes you motion sick.
That's what makes you motion.
That's what makes you become
Tom's
the
first
concept. And so I guess, like, you know, for coding, you don't need high frame rate necessarily. You don't need performance. But if you are asking for an infinite space in which you can view an infinitely huge workspace, which would be fantastic and be super useful, if as you move your head, it doesn't update at the right frame rate, that might make you vomit instead of work productively. And so maybe that's the argument against that. Even if that is true, that will only be true for like 2 to 4 years, and then, you know, there will come a time when just the basic laptop performance is enough to keep up with VR, and then screen size will become irrelevant, and yeah, that will be incredible. Like that it's I don't even use multiple monitors, and people who do tell me that that's a huge boost in productivity, and I believe them. But I also think that, like, yeah, there's so many things about the way you make games that are limited by technology, and that are limited by screen space, and that are limited by just basic interactivity limits that are, for games, they don't need to be any better than they are. There are loads of things you can do in games with the current systems, but for creating games, you need to be thinking about 17 different things all at once, and you need them all on screen all at once, and that's just not possible with a finite screen size. And, yeah, I definitely think the future is like infinite canvases with being able to look wherever you like and keep everything you're ever working on all in this kind of spatially contiguous and coherent world.
I'd really like to get my hands on, is it Google's Tilt Brush?
Yeah.
The Vive software, which lets you sketch 3D shapes in 3D space. That looks fantastic.
Did you see the GIFs that, like, NVIDIA did a sort of a competition where they had game developer artists come to their booth and paint something using Tilt Brush? It's weird because it's NVIDIA sponsoring a competition using Google software, using Valve's hardware, plus HTC's hardware. But it was people like Sarah Northway and sort of 4 or 5 other developers who I knew of from either their games or their indie studios. And the way Tilt Brush works is you paint something in 3D, you can change your brush at any time from, like, I want to paint, you know, a blue line to I want to paint with fire or I want to paint with, like, magic purple sparkles or whatever. And it's also kind of animated. And so the lines you draw are kind of, they can shimmer and they can flame up or whatever, but also it records the process of you drawing it. So these game artists are drawing these things in 3 dimensions that, I don't know how long it took them, like half an hour or something, and they play it back in 10 seconds, and you get to see this thing come to life in real time. And I can't remember who it was, but someone drew a dragon, and for most of it you're watching thinking, yeah, this is pretty good, this is a cool dragon. And then right at the last minute, they do the flame coming out of the dragon's breath, and you've got all these brushes for it that are, you know, things that just the line by itself will shimmer and flare up and cause all these graphical effects. And they just do like 7 different ones of those. And then so, like, as you're watching this dragon form, suddenly all the flame bursts out of its mouth, and it's just spectacular.
I think one of Neil Stephenson's old books, A Diamond Age, or The Diamond Age, talks about engineers assembling molecular machines using virtual reality and, like, haptic feedback, and we're slowly getting there. And that's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
Finally, Scoo writes, The Division is packed with shit-hot incidental animations. What is your favourite incidental animation, and from which game?
This is really annoying because I know there have been thousands of amazing sort of idle animations, and I can't think of any of them specifically, but I'm a big fan of infinite looping machines in environments.
Right.
These crop up every now and again where an environment artist wants to make a dynamic environment that is full of movement and keeps going round and round, but because of the way that game resources work, you can't have things piling up dynamically in the corner. Everything has to loop back round to the beginning perfectly. And there was a fantastic machine in the Deus Ex expansion, the shipping one, which
Oh, yeah.
is sorting like shipping crates and pulling them out and sorting them and moving them around and putting them back in. But most recently, it's a minor spoiler for Fallout 4, but you get to see how the synths in that are manufactured. And that is a fantastic sort of production line that I just spent 15 minutes watching. It was great.
I've heard people say that is the source of, like serious plot problems with Fallout 4. So again, it's a Fallout 4 spoiler, and it's not even it's a spoiler of things I haven't even got to yet. But apparently a lot of the plot depends on the kind of scarcity of synths, sort of like whether they're worthwhile human beings, whether they're valuable, and whether you can save every one. And even if you want to side with the Institute, who are the ones who kind of are pro-synth, or, no, actually they're not pro-synth. They see synths as meaningless tools that they can use to whatever ends they want, because they make them. I read a Reddit thread about this where people were kind of, the Fallout 4 Reddit is the thing I'm subscribed to, and it's surprisingly negative. So about 50% of the threads are people just explaining what they don't like about Fallout 4. But one of the key things that comes back, even from quite big fans of it, is that that one scene where you get to see synths being made on a production line, just like one every 6 seconds or whatever, undermines a whole load of plot logic about like, well, if these are people who are really valuable, how come they're just been made so easily? Why don't, the Institute can make them so easily? How is it not trivial for them to conquer the whole world? Or how is it not trivial for them to do this? Or why do they care about that? Or why do they care about this? So yeah, I haven't got that far in Fallout 4, but
Incidental animation has actually broken the entire game. Good job, incredibly talented animator.
there was actually, I kind of do have an answer to this now. And I can't remember whether it was LBA 1 or LBA 2. So Little Big Adventure, which is, by Adeline Software, who are, not actually the same company, but formed of the same people who made Alone in the Dark, the original. Weirdly, they're still making games to this day that have basically nothing to do with it. They made Soul Bubbles, or Frederick Reynal made Soul Bubbles for the DS, and now they're making some kind of horror game that doesn't really look like it has anything to do with these games. Anyway, LBA 1 or LBA 2, I can't remember which one it is. You play as a guy called Twinsen, who is, what are they called? Quetches? Basically, there's a humanoid race in this fantasy world that has rabby bunnies and elephants, or what, there are elephants and there are rabbits. And there's a human race. And you are kind of a unique one of the Quetches, and you have a robe and a medallion and all this other stuff. And then at some point in one of these games, you go to prison. And you start in prison in the first game, and when you are sent back there, I don't know if it's your cell or the cell next to where you originally started, there is just an almost perfect copy of you, but with just chunks missing out of him. It's just you, but they're just like his top left torso is missing, and there's just green pus where it should be. And he's just kind of staggering around a cell, just doing nothing. And it's just fucking terrifying. Like, this is it's an isometric, cute game. Most of it's just kind of totally, within the realm of a fun, quirky French adventure game. And then you just see a mutilated version of yourself kind of staggering around a prison cell, and you just think, what the fuck is happening? It was really like a, bizarre moment in gaming. I've never had anything like that before or since.
I actually genuinely can't think of an answer to this one, because all I ever think about when I think of idle animations is that one fucking animation from all the Sonic the Hedgehog games where if you leave it on for long enough, Sonic the Hedgehog wags his finger at you as if you've made some kind of error by briefly leaving the game in a sort of judgmental way. And maybe there's a line there like, maybe games have gotten less judgmental about you momentarily leaving them for a while. But while there's much finer work than that, when I ever think about the time animators put into like adding life to the game if the player isn't interacting with it, all I ever think about is like Sonic's kind of a prick, actually. Like, come on, man. Like, it's important to you, but it's not important to me. Stop being such a twat. And that's all the questions we have.
Fuck Sonic.
Fuck Sonic.
You can send us questions. Questions
you
at crateandcrowbar.com. You can tweet them at us. We're at Crate and Crowbar on Twitter. You can post them on a forum, which is crateandcrowbar.com/forum. And you can join in our Discord. That's not really a good place to ask questions, but you can do that. And the URL is too complicated for us to say out loud, but it will be in the show notes. And you can tweet us individually. I am Pentadact, Pentadact. Chris is...
At C Thurston, that's CTHURSTEN.
John is...
at JOHN_ARR.
And thanks everybody!
This week's Martian impression brought to you by Tom Francis.